In the beginning, there was only the Force, and then there were those who sought to bend it to their will. Long before the Empire, before the Clone Wars, before even the Republic as we know it stood proud across the stars, there existed an age of darkness so profound that its echoes still reverberate through the galaxy. This is the chronicle of the Old Republic's most powerful Sith Lords, masters of the dark side, who reshaped worlds, consumed planets, and left scars upon the very fabric of reality itself. Imagine a Jedi Knight so powerful that he killed his own master and fled into the unknown, only to be worshipped as a god by an entire civilization. Picture an emperor who drained the life from every living being on a planet, 8,000 Sith Lords included, all to fuel his own immortal existence. Envision a being so consumed by hunger that he became hunger itself, leaving entire worlds as lifeless husks drifting silently through space. Their names are whispered in the deepest archives: Ajunta Pal, the Deshad, Exar, Kun, Darth Revan, Darth Nihilus. Each one believed they had found the secret to ultimate power. Each one discovered a terrible truth too late. But here is what the Jedi will not tell you. Here is what has been hidden in restricted holocrons for thousands of years. These lords were not born as monsters. They began as seekers, as visionaries, as heroes. Some of them, the path to darkness is not a sudden fall into an abyss. It is a journey of small steps, each one seeming reasonable, each one promising salvation, until you look back and can no longer see the light. Tonight, we walk that path together, not to fall, but to understand. We will trace the rise and fall of 13 Sith Lords across 25,000 years of galactic history, from the first Dark Lord who landed on Korriban to the last who reformed the Sith into something that would endure for a millennium. But before one particular Jedi's exile led to the birth of the Sith Empire, before the first red lightsaber ever ignited in that ancient darkness, there was a war within the Jedi Order itself. 100 years of conflict over a single question: should the dark side be studied, or should it be feared? Those who chose to study it were cast out, and in their exile they would discover something far more dangerous than they ever imagined. So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy deep dives into Star Wars lore. Here's something interesting. Around 62% of you watching right now haven't subscribed yet. If you're finding value in these stories, hitting that subscribe button genuinely helps this channel grow and allows me to create more content like this. Drop a comment below telling me where in the galaxy you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our community span from Coruscant to Tatooine, or, Earth locations work too. Seriously though, knowing whether you're starting your day or ending your night with these stories always fascinates me. Now dim your lights, maybe turn on a fan for some ambient sound, get comfortable under your blanket, and let's begin our journey through 25,000 years of Sith history together. The Jedi Archives on Coruscant, repository of 10,000 generations of galactic knowledge. Its halls stretch deep beneath the temple, layer upon layer of holocrons, data crystals, and ancient texts preserved in climate-controlled vaults. Most Jedi walk these halls seeking tactical information, historical context for current missions, or philosophical guidance from masters long passed into the Force. But there is a section few are permitted to enter, a vault sealed by 4 rotating codes known only to the Council. Within this chamber rest the darkest secrets the Order has ever collected. Sith holocrons pulsing with crimson energy, journals of fallen Jedi describing their descent step by terrible step, weapon schematics for planet-killing superweapons, and comprehensive records of every major Sith Lord who has threatened the galaxy over the past 25 millennia. You are a Jedi lore-keeper, one of the few entrusted with studying these forbidden records. Your specialty is Sith history, not out of fascination with the dark side, but from the firm belief that understanding how the greatest Force users in history fell to darkness is essential to preventing future tragedies. For 3 years you have requested access to compile a complete chronological record of Old Republic Sith Lords. For 3 years the Council has denied you, arguing that such knowledge is too dangerous, that even studying darkness can corrupt. But recent events have forced their hand. Across the Outer Rim, ancient Sith artifacts have begun surfacing. Tombs thought sealed are found opened. Holocrons believed destroyed appear in black markets. Someone or something is gathering Sith knowledge, and the Council needs to understand what they might be seeking. You have been granted unprecedented access. 6 months to visit every major Sith Lord's tomb, study every available record, and compile a comprehensive analysis of what made these lords powerful and what ultimately destroyed them. You will not walk this path alone. Master Valis, an elderly Jedi historian, will accompany you. He is perhaps the only Jedi living who has spent more time studying the Sith than you have. For 60 years he has read their philosophies, analyzed their techniques, and traced their influence across galactic history, all without ever falling to the dark side himself. His presence is both guide and safeguard. He has seen others begin this research with pure intentions, only to slowly, imperceptibly, adopt the very philosophies they studied. He will watch for the signs. Together you stand now in the Archive's restricted vault, a holographic star map illuminated before you. 13 locations marked in red across the galaxy. Korriban, where it all began. Ziost, ancient capital of the Sith Empire. Dromund Kankos, hidden throne world of the Sith Emperor. Malachor 5, the wound in the Force. Yavin 4, prison of Exar Kun's spirit. Each marker represents a tomb, a temple, or a monument to power that ultimately failed. Your mission is clear. Document the rise and fall of the Old Republic's most powerful Sith Lords in chronological order. Understand the evolution of dark side mastery across 25,000 years. Learn what patterns emerge when beings pursue ultimate power. And most importantly, discover why even the mightiest Sith Lords, those who achieved everything they sought, always fell in the end. Master Valis places a weathered hand on your shoulder. His voice is quiet, measured, heavy, with the weight of decades studying darkness. Remember, he says, we do not walk this path to gain power, but to understand it. Every lord we study believed themselves strong enough to control the dark side. Every one of them was wrong. Stay vigilant. The most dangerous corruption is the kind you don't notice until it's too late. You nod, downloading the coordinates into your datapad. Your Republic research vessel waits in the temple hangar, fueled and ready for a journey that will take you to the darkest corners of known space and beyond. The first destination is already locked in, Korriban, the birthplace of the Sith Empire, where 6,900 years ago, exiled Jedi first landed and transformed from outcasts into gods. As your ship lifts off from Coruscant, the city planet falling away beneath you, you activate the first holocron. It flickers to life, projecting the image of an ancient Jedi Master from the Old Republic's earliest days. His voice, preserved across millennia, speaks a warning. If you are viewing this, then the darkness has risen again. What you seek to understand nearly destroyed us once. It may yet destroy us again. But ignorance is not protection. Only through knowing the enemy can we hope to stand against them. May the Force be with you, Seeker. You will need its guidance in the shadows ahead. The holocron dims, hyperspace beckons, and the first chapter of the longest, darkest story in galactic history awaits. The hyperspace journey to Korriban takes 3 days. Master Valis spends most of that time in meditation, preparing his mind for the darkness ahead. You spend it reviewing historical records, trying to piece together what actually happened 6,900 years ago when the Jedi Order tore itself apart. The Second Great Schism, that's what the archives call it. a clinical name for what was essentially a civil war that lasted 100 years. On one side stood the Jedi Council, orthodox in their belief that the dark side must never be studied, only resisted. On the other stood a faction of Jedi who believed that true mastery of the Force required understanding all its aspects, light and dark alike. They weren't evil, not yet. They were scientists, philosophers, seekers of complete knowledge. They argued that fear of the dark side gave it more power, not less, that only by studying it openly could the Order develop real defenses against its corruption. The war that followed devastated dozens of worlds. Jedi fought Jedi with a ferocity that shocked the Republic. These weren't strangers clashing over territory or resources. These were former friends, masters and apprentices tearing each other apart over ideology. The galaxy watched in horror as its greatest protectors became its greatest threat. In the end, the Orthodox faction won, not through superior philosophy, but through superior numbers and the backing of the Republic Senate. The defeated Jedi, thousands of them, were given a choice: renounce their beliefs and accept exile to agricultural worlds where they could live out their days under supervision, or leave Republic space entirely and never return. They chose exile, led by Ajunta Pol, who had been considered the finest swordsman of his generation. The defeated Jedi loaded their ships with whatever texts and artifacts they could salvage and jumped into hyperspace, heading for the unknown regions. The Council believed they were sending these heretics to their deaths. The unknown regions were uncharted, dangerous, full of spatial anomalies and hostile species. Most expected the exiles to perish within months. The Council was wrong. Your ship drops out of hyperspace, and Korriban fills the viewport, a red planet. Everything here is red. The rocks, the sand, even the sunlight seems tinted crimson as it filters through the dust-filled atmosphere. Mountain ranges carved by millennia of wind rise like broken teeth against the horizon. And everywhere, you can feel it. The dark side, not as a presence, but as an absence, as if the Force here has been hollowed out and filled with something else, something hungry. Master Valis opens his eyes from meditation. His face is pale. "I forgot," he says quietly, "how heavy it feels. The weight of all that accumulated darkness pressing down. Stay close to me. And if at any point you feel your thoughts turning toward justifications for what happened here, tell me immediately." The Valley of the Dark Lord sprawls before you as your ship descends. Massive stone monuments, each one a tomb, each one a testament to ego and ambition. They've stood here for thousands of years, worn smooth by sandstorms, but still projecting an aura of terrible grandeur. At the far end of the valley, largest of them all, stands the tomb of Ajunta Pol, the first Dark Lord of the Sith. But first, you need to understand what he found when he arrived. The Sith species, red-skinned humanoids native to this system. They had discovered the Force independently, developing their own techniques and philosophies over thousands of years. But their approach was fundamentally different from the Jedi. They didn't seek balance or peace. They sought dominance, power over others, over nature, over reality itself. Their society was brutally hierarchical. The strong ruled absolutely, and the weak served or died. They had sorcerers who could twist flesh with the dark side, creating monsters from ordinary creatures. They had warriors who channeled rage into superhuman strength. They had built a civilization based entirely on the principle that might makes right. When Ajunta Pol's fleet appeared in their sky, the Sith species saw gods descending from the heavens. These newcomers wielded lightsabers, technology beyond anything Korriban had ever seen. They could move objects with their minds, leap impossible distances, sense thoughts and feelings. To a primitive but Force-sensitive species, the exiled Jedi must have seemed omnipotent. Pol and his followers could have corrected this misunderstanding. They could have established themselves as teachers, guides, partners in developing a new civilization, but they were bitter, defeated, rejected by the galaxy they had tried to serve, and here was an entire species ready to worship them as divine. So they accepted godhood. The transformation didn't happen overnight. The historical records you've studied suggest it took decades. At first, the exiled Jedi simply taught the Sith species what they knew: combat techniques, meditation methods, ways to channel the Force more effectively. But the Sith sorcerers taught them things in return: ancient alchemical processes, rituals for binding Force energy to physical objects, techniques for draining life force from others to extend your own existence, knowledge the Jedi Order had forbidden and sealed away. Master Valis leads you into Ajunta Pall's tomb. The entrance is carved with hieroglyphs showing his transformation from Jedi Knight to Dark Lord. In the first panel, he wears Jedi robes and carries a standard lightsaber. By the final panel, he's draped in ornate armor, crowned like a king, surrounded by kneeling Sith offering tribute. The progression is chilling in its clarity. Inside, the air is cold, despite Korriban's desert heat. Your breath mists in front of you. Glow rods illuminate walls covered in more carvings. These ones tell the story of conquest. Pall and the other exiles didn't just settle on Korriban. They spread across the Sith Empire, claiming world after world, not through negotiation, but through demonstration of power. Any Sith Lord who challenged them was destroyed. Any who submitted was granted a position in the new hierarchy. Within 50 years, Ajunta Pall had made himself immortal in the eyes of his subjects, not metaphorically, literally. Using techniques learned from Sith sorcerers and combining them with Jedi knowledge of the Force, he extended his natural lifespan to over 200 years. He watched his contemporaries age and die while he remained vigorous, powerful, seemingly eternal. To the Sith species, this was final proof of his divinity. But immortality came with a price. The dark side sustained his body, but consumed his mind. The journals recovered from this tomb describe his growing paranoia. He trusted no one, not his fellow exiles, not his Sith servants, not even his own apprentices. He saw betrayal everywhere because he understood better than anyone what he would do if positions were reversed. Power makes you suspicious. Absolute power makes you insane. In the central chamber, his sarcophagus rests on a raised platform. The stone is carved from a single piece of black marble shot through with veins of red crystal. Sith runes cover every surface, preservation spells meant to keep his body intact until some prophesied resurrection. Master Valis approaches cautiously, one hand on his lightsaber, even sealed and dead for millennia. Ajunta Pall's presence radiates from this place. On the wall behind the sarcophagus, you find what you came for: a holocron. Not the sophisticated pyramidal devices later Sith would create, but a crude cube covered in the same runes as the sarcophagus. When you reach out with the Force, it activates reluctantly, as if waking from deep sleep. The image that appears is not the God King from the tomb entrance carvings. It's an old man, tired, his face lined with regret. When he speaks, his voice carries none of the commanding presence you expected. Instead, he sounds lost. If you are viewing this, then I am dead. Truly dead. Not preserved in some half-life state I've spent so long trying to achieve. Good. I grew weary of existence long ago. He pauses, and you can see him gathering thoughts that are clearly painful. We believed we were strong enough to study darkness without being consumed by it. We told ourselves that knowledge itself could not be evil, only its application. We were fools. The dark side is not knowledge, it's hunger, and the more you feed it, the hungrier it becomes. Another pause, longer this time. I became a god to these people. They worship me even as I write this message. But gods are not men, and I have forgotten how to be human. I cannot trust, I cannot love, I cannot feel anything but the constant gnawing need for more power, more control, more certainty that no one will take what I've built. This is what studying darkness did to us. Not corruption by some external force, corruption from within. So gradual we didn't notice until it was too late. The holocron flickers. The power sustaining it after so many millennia is fading. My apprentice will kill me soon. I know this. I've taught him too well. And his apprentice will kill him. And so the cycle will continue. We created not a civilization but a machine for producing tragedy. Each generation convinced they will be different. Each generation wrong. The image stabilizes one final time. Learn from my mistake, Seeker. Power without trust is an empire built on sand. We won the war against the Jedi Council and lost something far more important. We lost ourselves. The holocron goes dark. You and Master Valis stand in silence for a long moment. Finally, he speaks. The first Sith Lord. The one who started it all. And even he knew it was a mistake. He looks at you, his eyes searching your face. How do you feel after hearing that? You consider the question carefully. Sad, you admit. They weren't monsters. They were people who made choices that seemed reasonable at the time, and those choices transformed them into something they never intended to become. Master Valis nods slowly. Remember that feeling. Hold on to it. Because as we visit each tomb, as we learn about each subsequent Dark Lord, you're going to see the same pattern repeat over and over, and it would be easy to become numb to it, to see them as villains who deserved their fates, but they were all people once, people who thought they were making the right choice. Outside the tomb, Korriban's red sun is setting. The Valley of the Dark Lords fills with shadows that seem deeper and darker than they should be. Dozens more tombs wait to be explored. Sorzu Sin, who developed the alchemical techniques that would be used for millennia. Karnus Mur, who created the Rakul plague that still infects worlds in your own time. Remulus Drapar, architect of the Sith temples whose designs channel dark side energy like circuits channel electricity. But you've learned what you came here to understand. The Sith weren't born evil. They were made, slowly, through choices that built upon each other, through studying power until power became all they could see, through convincing themselves they were different from everyone who had fallen before them. As your ship lifts off, leaving Korriban behind, you input the coordinates for your next destination. But Ajunta Pal's final words echo in your mind. We lost ourselves. 4 simple words. The first lesson of 13 you'll learn on this journey. And perhaps the most important. 1800 years after Ajunta Pal became the first Dark Lord, the Sith Empire had transformed beyond recognition. What began as a collection of conquered worlds under exiled Jedi had evolved into a true galactic power. Multiple star systems answered to Korriban. Trade routes connected distant colonies. A culture had emerged distinct from both the Republic and the primitive Sith species the exiles had first encountered. This was the golden age of the ancient Sith, and at its apex stood a lord whose name still carries weight among dark side practitioners 5,000 years later. Tulak Horde. The records you've compiled describe him as the greatest lightsaber duelist in Sith history, not the most powerful Force user, not the most cunning strategist, not the longest reigning Dark Lord, but in single combat, no one before or since has matched his skill. In a 30-year reign, he fought hundreds of duels. He never lost, not once. Your ship approaches Korriban again. But this time you're prepared for the weight of darkness that permeates this world. The Valley of the Dark Lords appears below, and you can now distinguish between the different architectural styles. The oldest tombs, like Ajunta Pal's, are crude monuments built with more ambition than skill. The middle period tombs show refinement, incorporating Sith artistic traditions with off-world techniques. And then there are the tombs from the Golden Age, massive, precise, built to last until the stars themselves burned out. Tulak Horde's monument stands apart from the others. While most Sith lords position their tombs to tower over their neighbors, projecting dominance even in death, Horde's tomb sits in a natural alcove carved into the valley wall. It's almost modest by comparison, almost. Master Valis notices your observation. He didn't need to compensate, he explains as you descend. His reputation spoke for itself. When you're genuinely the most dangerous being in the galaxy, you don't need to announce it with architecture. The tomb entrance is guarded by statues, dozens of them lining the pathway leading inside. Each one depicts a different opponent, awed, defeated. You recognize some from your studies. Sith lords who ruled entire worlds before challenging him, Jedi Knights sent by the Republic to assassinate him, Mandalorian warriors in full battle armor, beast creatures from distant planets, all immortalized in stone, frozen in their final moments. Inside, the atmosphere shifts. Where Ajunta Pal's tomb felt heavy with regret, Horde's tomb feels sharp, aggressive, like the air itself wants to cut you. Training chambers branch off from the main corridor, their floors still stained dark from millennia-old battles. This wasn't just a tomb, it was an academy, a place where Horde tested his apprentices by forcing them to fight him to exhaustion, then fight each other for the privilege of learning his techniques. The central chamber contains more than just a sarcophagus. It's a museum of death. Weapons line the walls, lightsabers taken from defeated Jedi. Vibro blades that once belonged to assassins who tried and failed to kill him. Sith swords forged with alchemy to channel dark side energy. Each one represents a life ended by Tulak Horde's superior skill. You activate your datapad, accessing the historical files you prepared for this visit. Born into the Sith pureblood aristocracy, around 5,100 years before the Battle of Yavin, trained from childhood in combat and force techniques. Showed exceptional aptitude for lightsaber combat, but was considered emotionally cold even by Sith standards. His rise to power came not through political maneuvering or commanding armies, but through systematic elimination of every lord who might challenge him. Master Valis examines the training chambers, while you study the main hall. His philosophy was different from Pal's generation. He calls back to you. They sought knowledge and fell to ambition. Horde was born Sith. He never had to be corrupted because he was raised in a culture where strength equaled virtue. To him, domination wasn't evil. It was natural law. Her holocron rests on a pedestal near the sarcophagus. Unlike Ajunta Pal's crude cube, this is a proper pyramid, its facets glowing with internal red light. When you activate it, the image that appears is exactly what you expected. Tall, armored, face hidden behind a mask that shows only his eyes. When he speaks, there's no regret, no second thoughts, only certainty. I am Tulak Horde, Lord of Hate, Master of the Gathering Darkness, Dark Lord of the Sith. If you seek my knowledge, understand that it comes with a price, weakness. The hologram doesn't move, but you feel the weight of his attention as if he were actually present. The Jedi teach that fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. They are correct, but they conclude this makes hate something to avoid. I conclude it makes hate the most powerful tool in existence. Pure hate, refined and controlled, can fuel feats of power that serenity can never achieve. He gestures and the holocron projects images of his dueling techniques. 7 forms of lightsaber combat, each one executed with mechanical precision. Combat is mathematics. Horde's voice continues. Every opponent has patterns, weaknesses, fears. Study them, exploit them. Show no mercy because your enemy certainly won't. You watch the demonstrations, And even Master Valis moves closer, professional curiosity overriding his distaste. The techniques are undeniably brilliant, economical, nothing wasted. Every movement flows into the next with perfect efficiency. This wasn't fighting, it was surgical dismantling. I perfected what the Jedi call Jarkai, the holocron continues. Dual blade combat. They abandoned it as too complex to master. I proved them wrong. With proper discipline, a warrior can wield 2 blades as easily as one, defend from any angle, attack along multiple vectors simultaneously. The only limit is dedication to perfection. The demonstration shifts to show Force techniques. You recognize Force Drain, a dark side power that lets the user consume an opponent's life force. But Horde's version is more sophisticated than the crude life-stealing you've read about. He could drain precisely, taking just enough energy to weaken without killing. A duel could last hours, his opponent growing weaker while he grew stronger. Hatred must be pure, the hologram states, not rage. Rage is chaotic, uncontrolled, easily manipulated. True hatred is cold, focused. It sees the opponent not as a person, but as an obstacle to be removed. When you can hate without anger, you have achieved clarity. Master Valis makes a disgusted sound. This is what makes him so dangerous even now. He's not wrong about the techniques. They're extraordinarily effective. But the cost of thinking this way, of seeing every living being as either tool or obstacle, that cost is your humanity. The holocron continues its teachings, demonstrating combat scenarios, explaining how to identify and exploit psychological weaknesses, showing meditation techniques designed to refine hatred into fuel for the dark side. You record it all, knowing that Jedi archives need this information, not to use, but to defend against. Near the end of the recording, Horde's hologram says something unexpected. I was never defeated in combat. Remember this, when my apprentice kills me, as he inevitably will, it will not be through superior skill, it will be through poison, or treachery, or some other coward's method. Let that be my final teaching. Perfect mastery of one aspect of power cannot protect you from every form of attack. I made myself invincible in battle, but invincibility in battle is not invincibility in life. The holocron deactivates. The chamber returns to silence. You find the records of his death in a sealed scroll case. Master Valis was right. Tulak Horde's apprentice, unable to defeat him through combat, used Sith alchemy to create a poison so subtle it took months to work. By the time Horde realized he'd been poisoned, his body was too damaged for even dark side healing to repair. He died in rage, attempting to attack his apprentice even as his organs failed. He saw it coming, you observe quietly. He knew he'd be betrayed, he even predicted the method, but he couldn't stop it. Because his philosophy had no defense against it. Master Valis replies, he trained his apprentice to exploit weakness. He made himself strong in every way he valued. But he forgot that different people valued different things. To him, poison was beneath consideration. To his apprentice, poison was simply the logical solution to an impossible problem. Outside, you take recordings of the statues lining the entrance, each defeated opponent memorialized not out of respect, but as trophies, as warnings, as proof of dominance. The message is clear. Challenge the strong. And this will be your legacy, a stone monument to someone else's superiority. As your ship lifts off, you think about the progression. Ajunta Pal studied darkness and lost himself to ambition. Tulak Horde was born into darkness and perfected it into an art form. One fell from light, the other never knew light existed, yet both ended the same way. Betrayed by the very system they helped create. The coordinates for your next destination are already locked in. Marka Ragnos, the only Dark Lord to die peacefully. the only one who achieved what all the others sought: stability, order. A reign that lasted a century without constant warfare. But as you'll soon discover, even perfect balance cannot prevent the cycle from continuing. Because the Sith system isn't designed for sustainability, it's designed for conflict. And when the greatest unifier in Sith history finally passes, the empire he built will tear itself apart within hours of his death. Master Valis settles into meditation for the journey, but before closing his eyes, he offers one more observation. Horde achieved perfection in combat, complete mastery of his craft, and it meant nothing in the end. Remember that the dark side always promises that enough power will make you safe. It's always lying. 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith Empire stands at the absolute zenith of its power. Dozens of star systems answer to Korriban. The dark side flows through this civilization like blood through veins. Sith alchemy has created wonders and horrors in equal measure. The Republic knows of the Empire's existence but considers it too distant to threaten their interests. An uneasy peace has held for generations, and presiding over all of it, for a century of unbroken rule, is a Dark Lord unlike any who came before or would come after. Marka Ragnos. Your research painted him as an anomaly. In a culture built on betrayal and constant power struggles, he maintained stability for 100 years. In a system where apprentices murdered masters as a rite of passage, he died peacefully of old age. In an empire where conquered populations were enslaved or exterminated, he built a society where multiple species coexisted under Sith rule. Not equal, certainly, but functional, sustainable, almost civilized. The question that drove you to request this entire research mission returns as your ship approaches Korriban once more. How? How did one Sith Lord succeed where thousands failed? His tomb answers before you even land. It dominates the Valley of the Dark Lords, not through size alone, though it is massive, not through ostentation, though it's covered in precious metals and rare crystals, but through proportion. Every other tomb in the valley screams for attention. Ragnos's monument simply exists, perfect in its geometry, balanced in its design. Looking at it, you understand immediately. This was built by someone who had nothing to prove. Master Valis is unusually quiet as you approach. Finally, he speaks. In 60 years of studying Sith history, I've found only 2 lords who genuinely understood power. Ragnos was one. The other we'll visit later. Most Sith confuse power with force. They think ruling means dominating. Ragnos understood that real power is making others want to follow you. The tomb entrance is flanked by statues, but these are different from Tulak Horde's trophy gallery. These statues depict Sith from different species and social classes. Warriors, yes, but also architects, scholars, artists. Under each statue, inscriptions describe their achievements during Ragnos's reign. A military commander who conquered 3 systems without destroying their infrastructure. A Sith alchemist who developed healing techniques that saved thousands. A human slave who rose to become a planetary governor through demonstrated competence. He rewarded results. You realize aloud, not just loyalty or strength, but actual achievement. Revolutionary concept in a culture obsessed with bloodlines and force power. Master Valis agrees. Half the Sith Lords hated him for it. The other half prospered under his system, and the ones who hated him feared him too much to act. Inside the tomb is a work of art, where other Sith Lords filled their final resting places with weapons and dark side artifacts. Ragnos's tomb contains history. Holographic projectors line the walls, each one showcasing major events from his century of rule, the expansion into the Korlan system, the treaty with the Rakata Infinite Empire remnants, the establishment of the Sith Academy on Korriban that would train Force sensitives for millennia. But what strikes you most is what's absent. No training chambers where apprentices fought to the death. No prison cells where enemies were tortured. No ritual spaces for dark side ceremonies that required blood sacrifice. This tomb celebrates achievement, not suffering. The central chamber takes your breath away. Ragnars's sarcophagus rests on a platform of pure black stone veined with red and gold, but surrounding it, carved into the floor in a massive circle, are thousands of names. You kneel down, reading them at random. Sith purebloods, humans, Zabrak, Twi'leks. Some names are followed by titles indicating high rank, others have no titles at all. Everyone who died during his reign, Master Valis says softly. He had them all recorded, High Lord and mining slave alike. This chamber is a memorial to every being who lived and died under his rule. You look up at him. That's not very Sith. No, he agrees, it's not, and that's why he was unique. The holocron near the sarcophagus is a masterwork of Sith craftsmanship, perfectly balanced. Each facet carved with scenes from different periods of Ragnars's life. When you activate it, the figure that appears is immediately impressive, tall and powerful, but his face shows both human and Sith features, the hybrid heritage that gave him perspective neither species could achieve alone. I am Marka Ragnars. The hologram begins. His voice carries authority without aggression, confidence without arrogance. If you seek to understand how I ruled for a century while others barely lasted a decade, the answer is simpler than you imagine. I studied history. I learned from every Dark Lord who came before me, and I did the opposite of what killed them. The holocron projects images showing the Sith Empire during his reign. Prosperous worlds, functioning trade networks, academies producing competent administrators alongside powerful Force users. Tulak Horde believed perfect combat skill would protect him. It didn't. Ajunta Pal believed absolute power would bring security. It didn't. Every lord before me made the same error. They optimized for domination without considering sustainability. They built empires that couldn't outlast them. I chose differently. The hologram gestures and the scene shifts to show a throne room. Dozens of Sith Lords assembled, clearly arguing about something. I made the ambitious ones fight each other, not me. I gave the talented ones challenges worthy of their abilities. I killed only when necessary, and made examples of those deaths. Fear is useful, but fear alone creates rebels. Fear combined with opportunity creates stability. You're taking notes rapidly. This contradicts everything you thought you knew about Sith philosophy. Master Valis, you begin. But he holds up a hand. Watch, he says simply. The holocron continues. I was not kind. Do not mistake competent governance for compassion. I maintained order through calculated brutality when required and strategic generosity when useful. The Sith who served me well prospered. The Sith who challenged me died. The population saw a clear path to success under my rule. That's all civilization needs. Clear rules and predictable consequences. The scene shifts again, showing Ragnars in single combat against another Sith Lord. The fight is brief and decisive. I defeated every direct challenge. 37 lords tried to take my throne through combat. All 37 failed. But I also prevented countless challenges by making the smart lords realize they benefited more from serving than from rebelling. Why fight to rule when you can gain wealth, territory, and prestige without risk? Master Valis nods slowly. He weaponized pragmatism, made the system work for people, and in doing so created the most stable period in Sith history. But he was still Sith, you object. Still dark side. Still built on domination and hierarchy. Yes, Master Valis agrees. And that's the tragedy. He proved that even a fundamentally unjust system can function if administered competently. He made evil efficient. The holocron seems to anticipate this objection. You may wonder if I was truly Sith. If I truly embraced the dark side, let me clarify. I conquered 17 star systems. I personally killed hundreds in combat. I authorized the enslavement of entire planetary populations. I used the dark side daily to extend my life, to read minds, to enforce my will. I was absolutely Sith, but I was Sith who understood that power is worthless if it destroys what you're trying to rule. The recording shows his final years, still powerful but visibly aging. I will die soon. Natural causes, which none of my predecessors achieved. My body simply cannot sustain itself any longer, despite all the dark side techniques I know. I've made no provision for succession, because I know what will happen. The moment I'm gone, the empire I built will fragment. Naga Sado and Ludo Crash are already positioning for war. My greatest failure is not finding a way to make this system outlast me. The hologram fades slightly. But for 100 years I gave the Sith Empire something it never had before and will never have again. Peace. Not because we became less dark, but because we became more organized. That is my legacy. Proof that even darkness can build something functional. And proof that even perfection is temporary. The holocron deactivates. You stand in silence, processing what you've learned. Around you, the names of thousands encircle the sarcophagus. Each one a being who lived and died during Ragnos's century of rule. Some in slavery, some in privilege. All part of a system that worked precisely because it was designed to work. Master Valis examines the memorial floor, reading names at random. This disturbs you, he observes. It's not a question. Yes, you admit. Because it complicates everything. If he'd been a monster, I could dismiss him, but he was competent, fair within the constraints of his culture. He probably saved millions of lives by preventing the constant civil wars that plagued other eras, and he did it all while serving the dark side. Now you understand why I insisted on visiting his tomb, Master Valis says quietly. This is the most dangerous lesson. Evil isn't always chaotic and destructive. Sometimes it's organized and effective. Sometimes it builds universities and hospitals while also maintaining slavery and autocracy. Ragnos shows us that the dark side doesn't always announce itself with lightning and screaming. Sometimes it presents itself as order and prosperity. You access the historical records of his death. Died peacefully in his sleep at 153 years old. His funeral became a battlefield hours later, when Naga Sado and Ludo Kresh, his two most powerful subordinates, both claimed the right to succeed him. Ragnos's spirit manifested during the fight, declared that whoever won the coming war would prove themselves worthy, then faded back into the Force. The Empire tore itself apart within weeks. Master Valis continues. Everything he built gone in months. The great hyperspace war that followed killed billions. Because even the most stable system built on dark side philosophy contains the seeds of its own destruction. Outside you record the tomb's exterior one final time. This monument will stand for thousands more years, a testament to the only Sith Lord who achieved what all of them sought: complete power, maintained stability, died on his own terms, and still it wasn't enough. Still, the moment he was gone, the system collapsed. As your ship lifts off, heading for the next destination, you think about the progression. Ajunta Pol created the Sith through exile and ambition. Tulak Horde perfected the Sith through combat and hate. Marka Ragnos stabilized the Sith through pragmatism and organization. Three completely different approaches to power, all ultimately temporary. Where next? You ask Master Valis. He checks the coordinates. Naga Sado. We're going to see what happened when Ragnos's carefully maintained peace shattered, when ambition without temperance led to the first great war between Sith and Republic. When one lord's vision of conquest brought the entire empire to the edge of destruction, you settle into your seat for the journey. Behind you, Korriban recedes into the distance, but you can still feel it, the weight of all those tombs, all those Sith lords who believed they had found the answer. And ahead, more worlds wait, more tombs, more lessons carved in stone and preserved in holocrons. The story is far from over. The coordinates Master Valis inputs don't lead to Korriban this time. Instead, your ship turns toward the Yavin system, fourth moon of a massive gas giant at the edge of known space. This is where Naga Sado fled after his catastrophic war with the Republic. This is where he lived in exile for 600 years, and this is where his story truly begins to reveal the cost of unbridled ambition. During the 3-day journey, you immerse yourself in the historical records of what happened immediately after Marka Ragnas died. The funeral that became a battlefield. 2 Sith lords, both powerful, both ambitious, both convinced they were destined to rule. Ludo Kresh represented the conservative faction. He wanted to maintain Ragnas's isolationist policies, preserve what they had, avoid drawing Republic attention. Naga Sado represented the expansionists. He believed the Empire had grown stagnant, that true Sith should conquer, not merely maintain. Neither was wrong. Exactly. That's what makes their conflict so tragic. Chryse's caution came from genuine concern for the Empire's survival. Sado's ambition came from legitimate belief that the Sith were meant for greatness beyond hiding in the Outer Rim. Both served the dark side. Both wanted what they thought was best for their civilization, and both were willing to destroy that civilization to prove their point. Yavin 4 emerges from hyperspace before you. Dense jungle covers the moon from pole to pole. Massive stone temples rise above the canopy, clearly visible from orbit despite being built millennia ago. The architecture is distinct from anything on Korriban. Steeper angles, heavier construction, built not by Sith hands but by slaves under Sith direction. The Masasi, Master Valis says, as you descend, descendants of the Sith species but transformed by centuries of alchemical experiments, Sado used them as both labor force and test subjects. By the time he was done, they barely resembled their ancestors. Landing near the largest temple complex, you're immediately struck by the oppressive humidity. Korriban was dry, dead, its darkness clean like a blade. Here the darkness is thick, organic. It grows like the jungle itself, feeding on decay and propagating through corruption. You can feel it seeping into your lungs with every breath. The temple entrance towers above you, carved with images that tell Sado's story. The first panels show the funeral of Marka Ragnas. 2 Sith lords arguing while a spirit watches, then battle. Ships clashing above Korriban, lightsabers crossed in personal combat. The next panels show something unexpected. Republic scouts clearly lost, stumbling into Sith space, and Sado, recognizing opportunity, letting one escape. He manufactured the crisis, you realize. He let the Republic discover the Sith Empire deliberately. Master Valis nods grimly. Then he staged a fake Republic attack on Korriban, used Sith illusions to make a single ship look like an invasion fleet, convinced the Sith Council that the Republic was already at war with them. Brilliant and horrifying in equal measure. Inside the temple, the air is even heavier. Stone walls covered in bioluminescent moss provide dim light. Every surface is carved with more history. Sado's rise to power. His defeat of Ludo Kresh in space battle above Korriban. His coronation as Dark Lord. And then the war. The Great Hyperspace War lasted less than a year but killed billions. Sado led the Sith fleet through hyperspace routes the Republic didn't know existed, emerging in systems that had never seen military conflict. The initial attacks were devastating. Coruscant itself was besieged. The Jedi Temple took direct hits. For the first time in millennia, the Republic faced an enemy that could challenge them on their home territory. You find a chamber dedicated to Sadow's unique powers. Unlike Tulak Horde's combat mastery or Ragnos's administrative genius, Sadow specialized in illusion and deception on a massive scale. The carvings show him projecting false images of entire fleets, creating phantom armies that terrified populations into surrender without a single shot fired. His meditation sphere, a Sith artifact that amplified Force abilities, allowed him to affect multiple star systems simultaneously. But the most chilling display shows his superweapon, the Corsair. Sadow's flagship carried technology that could trigger stellar instabilities. The historical records describe it clinically. He destabilized the star Primus Galud, causing it to expand rapidly and destroy everything in the system. Thousands of ships, millions of beings, an entire planetary civilization, all consumed in stellar fire to demonstrate Sith power. This is where ambition without restraint leads. Master Valis says quietly, "You're both standing before a holographic projection showing the supernova." Ragnos maintained power through calculated application of force. Sadow sought power through overwhelming demonstration of destructive capacity. One sustained an empire for a century. The other destroyed it in months. The war turned when Sadow's illusions were exposed. Jedi strike teams, specifically trained to see through force deceptions, began identifying which fleets were real and which were phantoms. The Republic rallied. The Sith fleet, already stretched thin across multiple systems, found itself fighting a coordinated counteroffensive, and back on Korriban, Ludo Kresh returned with loyalist forces, trapping Sadow between two enemies. The battle above Korriban was apocalyptic. Sadow fought both the returning Republic fleet and Kresh's Sith forces simultaneously. He won technically. His superweapon destroyed Kresh's flagship. But the victory was Pyrrhic. Most of his fleet was gone. The Republic was closing in, and the Sith homeworld was in ruins. You follow the temple path deeper, toward Sadow's meditation chamber. The historical accounts describe his escape. He gathered his remaining loyalists, perhaps a few hundred Massassi warriors and a dozen Sith apprentices, and fled into hyperspace with Republic forces in pursuit. He led them on a chase that lasted weeks, using every trick he knew to obscure his destination. Finally, he reached Yavin 4, and there he made his final stand. Except it wasn't a stand. It was a transformation. The meditation chamber is circular, carved from a single piece of dark stone. Channels cut into the floor once held alchemical substances whose purpose you can only guess at. At the center, a platform designed for suspended animation. Sadow didn't die after the war. He couldn't accept death. So he used the same techniques that let Sith Lords extend their lives, but pushed them to an extreme. He put himself into a state of preservation that was neither life nor death, conscious but dormant, aware but unable to act. For 600 years, Master Valis examines the chamber with professional detachment that doesn't quite hide his revulsion. He was aware the entire time, trapped in his own body, able to sense the passage of centuries, but unable to move, speak, or interact, all because he refused to accept that he'd lost. A holocron waits on the suspended animation platform. When you activate it, Sadow appears not as the conquering warlord from the temple carvings, but as something older, bitter, diminished. His voice carries the weight of centuries of isolation. "I did not lose the war," he begins without preamble. "The war was won. The Republic was broken, their capital besieged, their fleets scattered. I lost because my own people betrayed me, because Ludo Kresh cared more about political victory than Sith dominance, because the Sith Council feared change more than they feared stagnation." The hologram paces, agitated even in recorded form. "I gave them the galaxy. I showed them that we could challenge the Republic, that our isolation was self-imposed weakness, not strategic safety, and they repaid me with betrayal. You recognize the pattern, not acceptance of responsibility, not acknowledgement of strategic errors, just blame directed outward, the mind of someone who learned nothing from failure because they refused to admit failure occurred. I preserved myself here, the hologram continues, gesturing to the chamber. 6 centuries I waited, 6 centuries I planned, and when the right student finally arrived, I taught him everything. Frieden Nad, a fallen Jedi seeking power, I gave him the knowledge to become a Dark Lord. Through him my legacy continued. The recording describes Sadow's teachings, advanced Sith alchemy, the meditation techniques he developed, the super weapon designs, everything he learned during his brief catastrophic reign as Dark Lord passed to a new generation. And then finally, death, not in battle, not through betrayal, simply exhausted, his spirit released after Nad absorbed the final teachings. Master Valis deactivates the holocron. 600 years of consciousness, alone in this chamber, and he learned nothing, still blamed others, still believed he was right, still passed his mistakes to the next generation, disguised as wisdom. Outside, you walk among the temples Sadow's Massassi slaves built, each one designed to channel dark side energy according to his specifications. Each one a monument to his refusal to accept defeat. The jungle has reclaimed much of the complex, but the stones themselves resist decay, built to last forever, housing ambitions that died millennia ago. You find evidence of the Massassi throughout the site. Not bodies, they're long since returned to the jungle, but tools, primitive cutting implements, hauling systems built from vine and stone. Evidence of a culture transformed from sentient beings into slave labor through generations of alchemical manipulation. Sadow found the Sith species when he arrived here. By the time he entered suspended animation, they had become the Massassi, stronger, more aggressive, less intelligent, perfectly designed to serve, but incapable of questioning. This is his real legacy, Master Valis says, holding a Massassi tool carved with frustrated attempts at written language. Not the war, not the superweapons. This, he took a species and deliberately reduced them, made them into what he needed rather than accepting what they were. The return journey to your ship is silent. You're processing what you've learned. Naga Sadow had legitimate vision. The Sith Empire was stagnating under isolationist policies. Expansion might have been necessary eventually, but his methods were so catastrophic, so lacking in patience or strategy beyond raw demonstration of power, that he destroyed what he was trying to save. And then, given 6 centuries to reflect on this, he concluded that everyone else was wrong. Master Valis breaks the silence as your ship lifts off. You notice the pattern emerging. Ajunta Pal regretted his transformation. Tulak Horde accepted his death philosophically. Ragnos understood his limitations, but Sadow, he learned nothing. And that made him more dangerous in death than in life because he kept spreading his ideology. You input the next coordinates. Drummond Caius, the hidden Sith Empire that rose from the ashes of Sadow's catastrophic war, and the Emperor who made Sadow's 600-year existence look like a brief nap by comparison. Vitiate, the Sith Lord who consumed an entire planet to fuel his immortality, who ruled not for centuries but for over a millennium, who made every previous Dark Lord look like ambitious children playing at power. One question, you say to Master Valis, if Sadow's war destroyed the Sith Empire, how did they come back? He looks at you with an expression somewhere between respect and dread. That's exactly what we're about to discover. And I promise you, the answer is worse than anything we've seen so far. Yavin 4 recedes behind you, its temple slowly being consumed by jungle that will eventually erase all evidence Naga Sadow was ever here. But his legacy persists in texts and holocrons, in techniques passed down through generations, in the cautionary tale of ambition, so great it consumed everything, including the ambition itself. The hyperspace tunnel opens before you. 3 days until Drummond Cass. 3 days to prepare for the darkest chapter in Sith history. The Emperor who didn't just extend his life or preserve his consciousness. The Emperor who transcended death entirely by consuming everything around him. And the terrifying realization that's beginning to crystallize in your mind. These Sith Lords aren't getting less powerful as history progresses. They're getting more powerful. Learning from previous failures, refining techniques, building on accumulated knowledge, which means the worst is still ahead. Drummond Cass exists in Imperial records as a myth, a hidden world shrouded in perpetual storms, home to a Sith empire that shouldn't exist. The Republic's official position is that the Sith were destroyed during the Great Hyperspace War 5,000 years ago. Every schoolchild learns about Naga Sado's defeat, about the Sith homeworlds falling to Republic forces, about the end of that dark civilization. The Republic is wrong. Your ship drops out of hyperspace and sensors immediately go haywire. Electrical storms blanket the entire planet. Lightning arcs between clouds in patterns that seem almost purposeful. The dark side presence here makes Korriban feel like a meditation garden by comparison. This isn't residual energy from ancient battles. This is active, sustained. A planet-sized wound in the Force that has festered for millennia. "I've been here once before," Master Valis says quietly. His hands tremble slightly on the console. 30 years ago, investigating rumors that the Sith survived. I spent 3 days on the surface before I had to leave. The oppression, the weight of what happened here, it becomes unbearable. I've faced dark side nexuses across the galaxy. Nothing compares to this. The storms make landing difficult. Your ship is buffeted by winds that shouldn't exist in a standard atmosphere. Lightning strikes your shields repeatedly. Finally, through a gap in the weather, you spot it. A massive citadel rising from the jungle. The architecture is unmistakably Sith, but more advanced than anything on Korriban. This wasn't built by slaves with primitive tools. This was constructed with engineering that rivals anything the Republic has achieved. You land in what was once a spaceport. Duracrete landing pads cracked by centuries of storm damage. Rusted hulks of ships that never left. The rain here isn't clean. It carries an oily residue that smells of decay. Everything it touches corrodes slightly faster than it should. Even the plants growing through the pavement look wrong, twisted, aggressive. Master Valis leads you toward the citadel, moving with the careful precision of someone who knows exactly where danger lies. The Emperor ruled from here for over 1,000 years, he explains. Not Naga Sado, not any of the Dark Lords you've studied so far. Someone else. Someone who saw the Great Hyperspace War as an opportunity, not a defeat. The citadel doors stand open. No guards remain after so many centuries, but you can see evidence of their presence. Weapon emplacements, designed to kill Force users specifically. Checkpoints where every visitor would have been screened. This wasn't just a palace, it was a fortress built by someone who trusted no one. Inside, the darkness intensifies. Your glow rods barely penetrate it. The corridors stretch impossibly far, and you realize this structure extends deep underground. The historical records you reviewed during the journey told you the basics, but being here makes it real in a way data never could. His name was Vitia. Though he would later take the title Sith Emperor and rule for 13 centuries, he began as something else entirely, a child. Specifically, the 13-year-old son of a minor Sith Lord on the agricultural world of Medrius, far from the centers of Sith power. while Naga Sado and Ludo Kresh were fighting for supremacy, while the great hyperspace war raged across the galaxy, this child was conducting his own experiments in a forgotten corner of the Empire. He killed his father first, not in combat, not through challenge or traditional Sith succession. He simply murdered him and took his place. The locals, recognizing power when they saw it, accepted the transition. By the time he was 15, he ruled the entire planet, and he was already planning something unprecedented. You descend deeper into the Citadel, following signs toward what the records call the Dark Temple. Master Valis stops at a junction, consulting his datapad. There are 3 sites we need to visit here. The Dark Temple, where he conducted his experiments. The Emperor's throne room, where he ruled the hidden empire, and the meditation chamber he used to project his consciousness across the galaxy. But first we need to understand what he did on Nathema. Nathema, the planet's original name before Vitiate transformed it into a wound in the Force. The coordinates are in your ship's database, but Master Valis already warned you that visiting it would be dangerous. Not because of dark side corruption, but because of absence. Nathema is a place where the Force doesn't exist. Standing there would be like trying to breathe in vacuum. Instead, you access the records preserved here, and the story they tell is worse than anything you've encountered so far. During the chaos of the Great Hyperspace War, Vitiate sent invitations to Sith Lords across the Empire. He claimed to have discovered a ritual that would make them all powerful enough to defeat the Republic. 8,000 Sith Lords responded, gathering on Medrias for what they believed would be a unification ceremony. They brought their apprentices, their retainers, their servants. The planet's population swelled to millions. The ritual began with traditional Sith ceremonies, chanting, meditation, channeling the dark side through ancient focuses. It lasted 10 days, and on the 10th day, Vitiate revealed the ritual's true purpose, not to empower 8,000 Sith Lords, but to consume them. Every living thing on Medrias died simultaneously. Every person, every animal, every plant, every microorganism. The Force itself was ripped from the planet, channeled through the ritual structure. Vitiate had spent years preparing, and absorbed into his being 8,000 Sith Lords, some of the most powerful Force users alive, their energy added to his own, and with that power, he transformed. The records describe him, after the ritual, as something that used to be human. He no longer needed food, water, or sleep. He could possess other bodies if his own was destroyed. He could project his consciousness across star systems. He had become, for all practical purposes, immortal, not through careful dark side techniques like extended lifespan, not through suspended animation like Naga Sado, but through consuming so much life energy that death itself couldn't touch him. The planet, renamed Nathema, became a permanent scar on reality. 5,000 years later, it remains lifeless. No bacteria, no insects, no wind. The Force cannot exist there, because Vitiate consumed it entirely. Standing on Nathema is like standing in a hole in the universe, where something fundamental is simply missing. Master Valis sits heavily on a piece of fallen masonry. He looks exhausted, despite having done nothing physical. Do you understand what this means? Ajunta Pal extended his life to 200 years through regular dark side techniques. Vitiate consumed an entire planet's life force and achieved actual immortality. The scale is incomprehensible. You move through the Citadel's archive section, finding records of what came next. Vitiate, now calling himself the Sith Emperor, gathered the surviving Sith fleeing the Republic, not the leaders, not the powerful lords who might challenge him, but the desperate, the defeated, the ones willing to follow anyone who promised survival. He led them into the unknown regions, to Drummond Cass, and there rebuilt the Sith Empire in secret. But this empire was different. Under Ragnar, Sith Lords competed for power within a functioning hierarchy. Under the Emperor, there was only the Emperor. He ruled as an absolute deity, making no decisions himself, leaving the actual governance to a dark council of subordinates while he pursued his true goal. The throne room reveals this clearly. The Emperor's throne sits elevated above all else, but it's empty. Always was, according to the records. He rarely appeared in person, instead projecting his presence when needed. The Dark Council chamber below shows 12 seats for the lords who actually ran the empire. They competed viciously with each other for the Emperor's favor, but none dared challenge him directly. He was too powerful, too alien, too far beyond their understanding. You find records of his long-term plans. They're chilling in their scope. The Emperor didn't want to conquer the Republic. He wanted to consume it. Every living being in Republic space, potentially every living being in the galaxy, all of it fuel for a ritual that would transform him into something beyond even his current state. A being of pure dark side energy, sustained by the death of all other life. He spent 1,000 years preparing, Master Valis explains, reading from a recovered datapad. He manipulated the Mandalorians into attacking the Republic, hoping to weaken both sides. When that didn't work perfectly, he influenced 2 Jedi Knights investigating the Mandalorian wars, corrupted them, turned them into Darth Revan and Darth Malak, used them to find the Starforge, hoping they'd use it to devastate Republic fleets. The meditation chamber is the most disturbing space yet. A spherical room, every surface carved with channeling runes. The Emperor would sit here for years at a time, his consciousness spread across the galaxy, influencing events through careful manipulation. A suggestion here, a vision there, arranging pieces on a board so vast that individual lives, planets, entire civilizations were just components in his design. You activate a holocron found in this chamber. Unlike the other recordings you've seen, this one doesn't show Vitiate. It can't. His transformation was so complete that capturing his image became difficult. Instead, the holocron projects his voice, and it's wrong. Multiple voices speaking simultaneously, harmonizing in ways that make your head ache. The Force is will, the voices say. Strong will dominates weak will. I have consumed more Force energy than any being in history. Therefore, my will should dominate all reality. This is not tyranny. This is natural law elevated to cosmic scale. There's a pause, and when the voices continue, they've shifted slightly. More human, but only barely. The Jedi preach balance. Fools, balance implies equality between opposing forces. I am proof that one will, sufficiently powerful, can overcome all opposition. I will be the Force. Everything else will be fuel. Master Valis deactivates the holocron before it can continue. His face is pale. He's insane. Not metaphorically, clinically insane. The ritual anathema destroyed his humanity so completely that he stopped being capable of human thought. He's hunger given consciousness, purpose without mercy, power without restraint. The records show his eventual fate. The Jedi Knight Revan, after redemption, tried to stop him, failed, was captured and tortured for 300 years, while the Emperor tried to drain his knowledge. A strike team eventually freed Revan, but by then the Emperor had grown even stronger. It took multiple attempts, multiple heroes, and finally the sacrifice of everything Revan had left to weaken Vitiate enough that he could be destroyed. But even destruction wasn't final. His essence persisted, possessed others, returned multiple times. The galaxy spent 4,000 years dealing with the consequences of what he became on Nathema that day. Outside the Citadel, the storms continue their endless pattern. Lightning strikes the same locations repeatedly, following paths carved by dark side energy over centuries. The jungle grows thick despite the toxic rain because the plants here have adapted to feed on corruption rather than sunlight. This is the escalation you noticed. Master Valis says, as you return to the ship, each Sith Lord learns from predecessors and pushes further. Ajuntapal extended his life. Vitiate consumed a planet. What comes next will be worse, because knowledge accumulates, because techniques refine, because each generation of Sith stands on the corpses of the previous generation and reaches higher. You're exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with physical exertion. Learning about Vitiate feels like staring into an abyss that stares back with calculating interest. He wasn't passionate like Sado. He wasn't principled like Ragnus. He wasn't even hateful like Tulak Horde. He was something else entirely, purpose without personality, will without wisdom, the ultimate evolution of Sith philosophy, stripped of everything human until only hunger remained. As your ship breaks atmosphere, you take one last look at Dromund Kai's. The storms continue. The citadel stands empty but not abandoned, because the Emperor's influence persists in the very stones, in the atmosphere, in the wound he carved into reality. He's gone, finally, truly destroyed, after 4,000 years of persistence. But what he proved remains, that with enough power, enough ruthlessness, enough willingness to sacrifice everything including your own humanity, you can become something that transcends life and death. You can become a force of nature, terrible and inevitable, and you can rule for over a millennium, shaping galactic events from the shadows, while everyone above thinks you're myth. The next destination is already loaded, Onderon, where 600 years after Vitiate's ritual, another Sith Lord would discover Naga Sado's teachings and begin the cycle again. Freedon Nide, a fallen Jedi who would prove that you don't need to consume planets to achieve immortality. Sometimes, refusing to let go is enough. Onderon appears almost pleasant. After Dromund Kai's, the planet orbits a comfortable distance from its sun, supporting a functioning biosphere and human civilization that dates back thousands of years. From orbit, you can see the walled city of Iziz, capital of the kingdom, that still bears the marks of its dark past. But unlike Korribin's lifeless desert or Dromund Kai's perpetual storms, Onderon looks almost normal. Almost. The dark side presence here is subtle. Not the overwhelming weight of Vitiate's corruption or the sharp malevolence of the Valley of the Dark Lords. This feels more like a stain that seeped into stone over centuries. Persistent, ineradicable, the kind of darkness that becomes part of the foundation. Master Valis briefs you during descent. Freedon Nad is different from the Sith Lords we've studied so far. He wasn't born into the Empire. He wasn't exiled with Ajuntapal. He was a Jedi Knight from the Republic, who fell to darkness by choice. And unlike most fallen Jedi who burn brightly and die quickly, Nad built something lasting. The city of Iziz sprawls beneath you. Massive walls protect it from the wilderness beyond. Walls built with dark side enhanced durability that has let them stand for 4 millennia. Landing clearance directs you to a platform near the royal palace. The current government knows you're here to investigate historical sites and has granted access to areas normally restricted to outsiders. A local historian meets you at the landing pad. She's elderly, with the kind of weariness that comes from spending a lifetime studying tragedy. "You're here about Nad," she says, without preamble. It's not a question. Everyone who comes investigating our dark history wants to understand him. How a Jedi became a king. How a king became a ghost. How a ghost held power for 300 years after death. She leads you through the city streets. The architecture shows layers of history. Primitive structures from before Nad's arrival. Sophisticated buildings from his reign. More recent construction attempting to move past that legacy. But everywhere subtle design elements meant to channel or contain dark side energy. This city was built around darkness like a pearl forms around an irritant. The royal palace contains a museum now. artifacts from different eras displayed behind protective transparistile. The historian stops before a lightsaber in a sealed case, Nad's weapon. We keep it here because destroying it proved impossible, and storing it anywhere else risked it falling into the wrong hands. It still hums sometimes. After 4,000 years, the crystal remembers its master. You examine the blade, standard Jedi construction from its era, but modified. The focusing crystal has been corrupted, turned from its original color to deep red through dark side immersion. The metal shows acid etching from Sith alchemy. This was a weapon that transformed along with its wielder. Tell us about him, Master Valis requests. From the beginning. The historian settles into a chair, and you recognize the posture of someone about to recite a story they've told 1,000 times, but never grow tired of sharing. Freedom Nad was born in Republic space about 4,400 years ago. Exceptional force sensitivity, accepted into the Jedi Order, trained under Master Matter Tremaine, who by all accounts recognized his student's potential but worried about his ambition. She pulls up a holographic display showing records from Jedi archives, commendations for Nad's skill, notes about his impatience with slower students, warnings from his master about seeking power over wisdom. The classic signs of a fall that everyone could see coming, but no one prevented. He requested advancement to Jedi Knight. The Council denied him, saying he wasn't ready. They were right, but their timing was catastrophic. That night, Nad killed Master Tremaine, not in anger or passion, the records suggest, but coldly, deliberately to prove he was strong enough to take what he believed he deserved. The museum's next section shows Nad's journey. He fled the Republic, knowing the Jedi would hunt him. But instead of hiding, he went searching. Every dark side rumor, every whisper of ancient Sith knowledge, he pursued. For years he wandered, growing stronger but frustrated by the limitations of what he could discover on his own. Then he found legends of Yavin 4, the historian continues. Stories about a Sith Lord in suspended animation. Most dismissed them as myth. Nad recognized truth. He traveled to the Yavin system and found exactly what he was looking for. Naga Sado, 600 years into his self-imposed exile, waiting for a worthy student. You've already been to Yavin 4, seen the temple Sado built, but understanding that Freedom Nad walked those same paths centuries ago adds new dimension to those ruins. He spent decades there, learning everything Sado could teach. Sith alchemy, meditation techniques, the philosophies that had driven the great hyperspace war, and crucially, methods for extending life beyond natural limits. When Sado finally died, his knowledge absorbed, Nad left Yavin 4 and went looking for a kingdom of his own. He chose Onderon specifically. The planet had a dark side tradition predating even the Sith. Native beasts were naturally aggressive and territorial. The human settlers had split into two factions, city dwellers and beast riders, locked in perpetual conflict. It was perfect. He arrived during a beast rider siege, the historian explains, leading you toward the palace's lower levels. Izzy's was on the verge of falling. The king was desperate, and this powerful stranger appeared, offering to save the city in exchange for position as advisor. The king agreed. The lower levels are older, stone instead of duracrete, carvings instead of holographic displays. These chambers date from Nad's reign. One room shows what happened next. Nad didn't just save the city, he slaughtered the beast riders with force powers they couldn't comprehend. Then he killed the king, claiming the throne by right of superior strength. The city, terrorized and grateful in equal measure, accepted him. He ruled for a century, the historian says quietly. You're standing now in what was once his throne room. The chair remains, carved from a single piece of black stone shot through with red veins. By Sith standards, he was almost benevolent. He ended the Beast Rider conflict through superior force. He improved the city's defenses. He established trade with other Onderonian settlements, but he also twisted everything to serve dark side purposes. Evidence of this fills the chambers, a nursery where royal children were trained in force techniques from infancy, a meditation room where Nad would drain life force from volunteers, maintaining his unnaturally long life, an alchemy laboratory where he conducted experiments on the local fauna, creating monsters to patrol the wilderness beyond the walls. He improved Isis, but he transformed it into something else in the process. A city that functioned through fear and dark side energy rather than law and community. Master Valis discovers the most chilling detail in a sealed archive. He had children, multiple generations of them, and he trained every descendant in Sith philosophy. He was building a dynasty, a dark side bloodline that would rule Onderon forever, each generation slightly more powerful than the last. The dynasty lasted. After Nad's death, his children ruled, then grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. For 300 years, the throne passed through his bloodline, and throughout that time, his spirit refused to depart. He remained a Force ghost tethered to his tomb by pure refusal to accept that his time had ended. That tomb still exists beneath the palace. You descend carefully, Master Valis maintaining constant vigilance for dark side corruption. The stairway is carved with warnings in Old Onderonian. Here lies power. Here lies death. Here lies the king who would not rest. The tomb chamber is smaller than you expected. Not a grand monument like on Caraban, but a personal space. Nad's sarcophagus rests in the center, covered in preservation runes similar to Sadow's, but more sophisticated. He learned from his master's techniques and improved upon them. Around the tomb, shelves hold holocrons, amulets, scrolls, everything he wanted to pass to future generations. A holocron on a pedestal activates as you approach, sensing force sensitivity. Nad's image appears, and unlike Vitiat's alien presence or Sadow's bitter regret, this hologram seems almost reasonable. A middle-aged human with sharp features and calculating eyes. "If you're seeing this, I am dead," he begins. Truly dead, spirit departed, not merely transitioning to a new state. Good. I grew tired of existence, though I refused to show it. Being a Force ghost is not the immortality I imagined. You remain aware but cannot affect the physical world as you wish. You watch your descendants make mistakes you cannot prevent. You slowly lose connection to humanity until you're barely more than an echo of what you were. The hologram shows genuine exhaustion. I became king to prove the Jedi wrong, to demonstrate that power and wisdom need not be separate. I achieved everything I set out to accomplish. I ruled justly by Sith standards, maintaining order and improving my subjects' lives while also pursuing dark side mastery. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough. You realize what makes Nad different. He's self-aware in a way most Sith Lords aren't. He understands exactly what he became and why it matters. 300 years I've lingered, the hologram continues. 300 years watching my bloodline rule Onderon. They're all corrupted now. Every child born into this family inherits not just political power, but dark side taint. I wanted to create something lasting, and I did. A curse masquerading as heritage. The recording shifts to show techniques, methods for spirit preservation, ways to manipulate descendants from beyond death, alchemy formulas that let him transform the Onderonian beast riders into more dangerous creatures, everything he learned from Sadow, refined through his own century of experimentation. I pass this knowledge forward, Knight says, but I also pass a warning. Refusing to release power creates a prison. I could have moved on after death. Instead, I clung to influence, and now I'm trapped here, unable to leave, but also unable to fully participate. Learn from my error. Power achieved is meaningless if you cannot let it go. The holocron deactivates. Master Valis examines the sarcophagus, running scans. The body was eventually destroyed by Jedi. Took multiple attempts. His spirit kept reanimating the corpse. When they finally succeeded in banishing him, the relief in ICs must have been overwhelming. The historian has followed you down. His influence persisted for another century even after the Jedi destroyed his remains. His last descendant, a student named Exar Kun, would take everything Nad taught and push it to an extreme that made Nad himself look restrained by comparison. Back in the city, you walk through streets where normal people live normal lives, mostly unaware of the darkness underlying their civilization's foundation. Children play in squares where Nad once conducted public executions. Markets thrive in buildings constructed with dark side alchemy. Life continues, adapting to corruption like plants growing in toxic soil. This is his real legacy, Master Valis observes, not the political dynasty or the Sith techniques. This, a civilization that functions normally on the surface while darkness permeates its foundation. Onderon will never fully escape what he made it. The best they can do is acknowledge the past and choose differently going forward. As your ship departs, you reflect on what separates Nad from other Sith Lords you've studied. He achieved everything he wanted: power, legacy, immortality of a sort, and he was self-aware enough to recognize it wasn't worth the cost. Yet even that recognition couldn't free him. He remained trapped by choices made decades earlier, unable to escape the prison he'd built from ambition and refusal to accept limits. The next destination awaits. Yavin 4 again, but this time to study the Lord who learned from Nad and took those lessons to their logical extreme, Exar Kun, the Jedi Knight who believed he could safely study darkness, who thought himself smarter than everyone who fell before, and who created a catastrophe that nearly destroyed both the Jedi Order and the Republic itself. Returning to Yavin 4 feels different this time. You've already seen the temples Naga Sado built, walked the chambers where Freeden Nad learned his dark arts. But now you're here for the most dangerous student of them all, the Jedi Knight who thought himself immune to corruption, the scholar who believed knowledge itself couldn't harm him. The man who would become Exar Kun and nearly destroy the galaxy in his arrogance. 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi Order is recovering from the trauma of the Great Sith War centuries prior. They've learned caution, forbidden certain texts, sealed away dangerous artifacts, and in doing so, they've created exactly the kind of mystery that attracts the brilliant and ambitious. Master Valis guides your ship to a different landing site than before, not near Sado's meditation chamber, but toward temples on the moon's opposite hemisphere. These structures are newer, built only 4 millennia ago compared to Sado's 5,000-year-old monuments, and they're larger, far larger. Sado built with slave labor over decades. Exar Kun commanded the Massassi through Sith alchemy and constructed these temples in months. The jungle here seems more aggressive, vines that actively try to impede your progress, insects that swarm with unusual coordination, plants that lean away from the temples as if repelled by what stands there. Master Valis notices your observation. Kun's corruption was different from Sado's, he explains. Sado transformed the Massassi through alchemy. Kun went further. He bound their very life force to these temples, using them as living batteries to fuel his rituals. When he performed his final act, consuming all of them simultaneously to preserve his spirit, their death screams became part of the structure itself. The main temple rises before you, like a mountain of carved stone. 4 sides, each one a perfect face meeting at a peak that seems to pierce the sky. At its base, an entrance carved with images that tell Khuln's story. But unlike other tombs where the carvings glorify their subject, These feel like warnings. Khorne at the moment of his fall, Khorne murdering his master, Khorne standing over the bodies of Jedi younglings he personally slaughtered. Inside, the temperature drops immediately. Not the natural cool of stone sheltered from the sun, but an unnatural cold that comes from absence. The Force should flow here. Instead, it's trapped, frozen in the moment of Khorne's final ritual 4,000 years ago. You begin with what the archives told you. Exar Kun was born to privilege in the Republic, Force-sensitive from childhood, accepted into the Jedi Order at the Standard Age. His master was Vordu Siosk Bears, a Krivaki Jedi known for wisdom and patience. By all accounts, Kun excelled, brilliant mind, exceptional lightsaber skills, natural leader, the kind of student every master hopes to train. But brilliance without humility is just arrogance waiting to ignite. Khorne believed himself special, different from other Jedi, smart enough to study forbidden knowledge without being corrupted by it. He argued with the Council, insisting that understanding dark side techniques would make the Order stronger, not weaker. When they refused, he began researching in secret. The Temple's first chamber shows this period. Holographic projectors still functional after 4 millennia. Display records Kun himself created. You watch him as a young Jedi Knight, handsome and confident, explaining his philosophy to the camera. The Jedi fear knowledge, his recorded self states. They believe that studying darkness will corrupt us. But I've read the histories. Every Jedi who fell to the dark side was weak, undisciplined. I am neither. I can learn these techniques, understand them, and remain firmly in the light. The Council's fear is holding us back. Master Valis makes a disgusted sound. Every single Sith Lord we've studied believed this exact thing. Every single one thought they were the exception, and every single one was wrong. The next chamber details Khorne's journey to Onderon. He'd found references to Freedon Nad in restricted archives, and became obsessed. Here was a fallen Jedi who achieved real power, who ruled for a century, who found actual techniques rather than philosophical meandering. Khorne convinced himself that studying Nad's legacy would help him protect against future falls, not cause his own. Onderon's royal family, still tainted by Nad's bloodline, welcomed him. They showed him Nad's tomb, shared the holocrons, and Nad's spirit, trapped and bored after centuries, found the perfect student, young, brilliant, convinced of his own immunity to corruption. The spirit began teaching immediately, but Nad's teachings came with traps. Sith alchemy that seemed like pure technique but required dark side energy to perform, meditation methods that enhanced power but fed on negative emotions, combat forms that increased effectiveness but encouraged rage. Each lesson pulled Khorne slightly further from the light, so gradually he didn't notice the transformation. The temple chamber dedicated to this period contains artifacts from Onderon, Nad's training holocrons, copied by Khorne for his own reference, journals describing his growing abilities and his growing frustration with Jedi restrictions, and buried in those journals, warning signs that everyone missed. His language becoming more absolute, his judgments of others growing harsher, his certainty about his own righteousness hardening into dogma. He was falling, you observe, reading the journal entries. But he kept telling himself he was in control. That's always how it works, Master Valis replies. The dark side doesn't announce itself. It whispers, it justifies. It makes every step seem reasonable until you look back and realize you've walked a mile into shadow. Nad eventually sent Khorne to Yavin 4, to the temples where he himself had learned from Sado. There, Khorne discovered not just knowledge but power on a scale he'd never imagined. The temples were designed as focusing lenses for dark side energy. Standing in certain chambers amplified force abilities exponentially, and the Masasi who lived here, Descendants of Sadow's transformed Sith were perfectly conditioned to serve a Dark Lord. The deepest chamber shows what happened next. Kums nearly died in Nad's final test, trapped in a Sith tomb and attacked by alchemically created monsters. In desperation, he fully embraced the dark side, not gradually, not through careful study, but completely, drinking from that well of power to save his life. And in that moment, the transformation completed. The Jedi Knight died. Exar Kun, Dark Lord of the Sith, was born. Master Valis activates a holocron found in this chamber. Kun appears, but this isn't the confident young Jedi from earlier recordings. This is something else. His eyes burn with barely contained power. His voice carries absolute certainty, and his words drip with contempt for everything he once believed. "I have seen the truth the Jedi hide," he declares. "The dark side is not corruption. It is liberation. It frees you from doubt, from weakness, from the chains of attachment that the Order claims to transcend but actually just redirects toward their institution. I am more powerful now than I ever was as a Jedi, more capable, more effective, more alive." The holocron shows his techniques, the double-bladed lightsaber he pioneered, allowing simultaneous attack and defense, force drain refined beyond anything Tulak Horde achieved, capable of consuming life from a distance, Sith alchemy that could transform ordinary creatures into monsters in hours rather than generations, and his greatest innovation, the ability to sever another Force user's connection to the Force entirely. He recruited other Jedi, Master Valis explains, moving through the temple, not by force but by argument. He presented logical reasons why the dark side should be studied, why Jedi restrictions were holding them back, why emotion wasn't something to suppress but to channel. And the terrifying thing is, his arguments were sophisticated. Intelligent Jedi fell for them because they sounded reasonable. The Great Sith War began with Kun declaring himself Dark Lord. He established a Brotherhood of the Sith, different from the hidden empire on Dromund Kaas. This was an open challenge to the Republic and the Jedi Order. His message was simple: the dark side is the path to true understanding. Join willingly or be conquered. Thousands of Jedi fell to his recruiting, not through direct corruption, but through intellectual persuasion. He made darkness seem like the rational choice, like the next step in evolution, like the brave choice that weak Jedi were too afraid to take. And once they fell, once they used dark side techniques even once, the rest followed inevitably. The war was catastrophic. Kun's forces attacked Jedi temples directly, not just to conquer, but to corrupt. He specifically targeted younglings, children training to become Jedi, either killing them or turning them. The psychological impact on the Order was devastating. These were children they'd failed to protect, innocents murdered or twisted by someone who had been one of their own. Master Valis stops before a chamber sealed with multiple barriers. "This is where it ended," he says quietly. The Jedi fleet arrived in orbit. They knew they couldn't take the temples by assault. Kun was too powerful, his defenses too strong, so they made the hardest choice in their history. The chamber contains a single platform. Scorch marks around it suggest immense energy discharge, and when you examine the platform with Force senses, you feel nothing, not darkness, not light, just absence. This is where Kun stood when he performed his final ritual. He saw the fleet coming. Master Valis continues, knew he would lose. His physical form would be destroyed, and everything he'd built would crumble, so he chose a different path. He performed a ritual that sacrificed every Massassi on the moon simultaneously, thousands of them dying in an instant. Their life force fueled his transformation from physical being to spirit, but not a normal Force ghost. Something else, a consciousness bound to these temples, preserved but trapped. The holocron in this chamber is the last Kun recorded. His image is translucent, flickering. The recording was made after the ritual, when he'd already transformed into a spirit. "I will remain," the spirit says, and there's something hollow in his voice now. The absolute certainty is gone, replaced with grim determination. "I will remain and wait, centuries if necessary, millennia, until another comes who is worthy of my knowledge, and through them I will return." But he never did, not truly. He attempted to possess Luke Skywalker 4,000 years later, almost succeeded, but was ultimately destroyed by the new Jedi Order. 4 millennia of imprisonment in these temples, 4 millennia of consciousness without form, 4 millennia to reflect on the choice that seemed so logical in the moment. He achieved immortality, you observe, the goal so many Sith Lords sought. He achieved a prison, Master Valis corrects, unable to move beyond these temples, unable to interact with the physical world, except in limited ways, unable to release his consciousness and become one with the Force. He got exactly what he asked for, which was the worst possible punishment. Outside, you walk among the temples as the sun sets. Yavin's massive gas giant rises on the horizon, bands of color swirling in its atmosphere. It's beautiful, peaceful, and directly beneath your feet lie the remains of thousands of Massassi who died screaming, their deaths fueling one man's desperate attempt to avoid consequences. Exar Kun is the cautionary tale, Master Valis says as you return to the ship, not because he was weak or stupid, or even particularly evil at the start, but because he was brilliant, capable, and absolutely convinced he was the exception to every rule. That's the most dangerous combination in the galaxy. As Yavin 4 recedes behind you, you think about the progression. These Sith Lords are getting more sophisticated. Ajunta Pal stumbled into darkness through exile. Khorne walked into it with eyes open, convinced he could handle it. The rationalizations are evolving. The self-deception is becoming more elaborate. And that makes the corruption more dangerous, not less. The next destination is already loaded. The Jedi Knight who would exceed even Kun in both power and tragedy. The man who fell to save the galaxy and nearly destroyed it in the process. Revan, and his shadow, Malak. The story of friendship twisted into rivalry, of noble purpose corrupted into tyranny, of a fall so complex that even the victim couldn't fully understand what had happened to him. The Star Forge no longer exists. Destroyed at the end of the Jedi Civil War, its wreckage scattered across the Lehon system. But you're not going to the Star Forge, you're going to where the story really begins. Malachor 5. The planet where Revan and Malak won the Mandalorian Wars and lost themselves in the process. Malachor 5 exists in a state of perpetual dying. The mass shadow generator superweapon tore it apart decades ago, but the planet refuses to fully collapse. Chunks of surface float in loose orbit around a fractured core. The dark side energy here is so concentrated that it affects sensors from light years away. Republic charts mark this system as forbidden. Approaching it without clearance means automatic quarantine upon return. Master Valis obtained special dispensation from the Council, but even he looks uncertain as your ship enters the system. "I've never been here," he admits. Few have. The wound in the Force is so severe that most Force sensitives can't tolerate proximity. We'll need to be quick. The largest intact piece of surface still holds structures. The Treyus Academy, where Sith teachings persisted long after the Mandalorian Wars ended. But before you investigate that, you need to understand what Revan and his friend Alec were before this place changed them. During the hyperspace approach, you reviewed every record available about the Mandalorian Wars. The context matters. The Mandalorian Crusaders swept into Republic space 3,900 years ago, conquering world after world. They weren't interested in occupation or resources, they wanted war itself. Combat was their religion, and the Republic provided worthy opponents. The Jedi Council refused to intervene, not out of cowardice but from genuine strategic concern. They sensed something manipulating events, pushing the Mandalorians toward the Republic. They wanted to understand the enemy before committing. But while they meditated and analyzed, Republic worlds burned. Two young Jedi Knights couldn't accept that calculus. Revan, charismatic and brilliant, argued that protecting the innocent was more important than understanding distant threats. Alec, his closest friend and most loyal supporter, agreed absolutely. Together they defied the Council and led a third of the Jedi Order into battle. And they won. Not just tactically, but strategically. Revan proved to be a military genius, reading enemy patterns, predicting movements, turning the Mandalorians' own tactics against them. Within 2 years, the unstoppable crusade was stopped. The Mandalorians were defeated, their leader killed in personal combat by Revan. The Republic was saved. But victory came with a price no one anticipated. Your ship settles onto a relatively stable chunk of surface near the Academy. The moment you step outside, the difference from every other dark side site becomes apparent. This isn't oppressive darkness. This isn't malevolent presence. This is absence. A hole in the Force where something fundamental was ripped away and never healed. Master Valis staggers, catching himself against the ship. His face is pale. "I can feel why they fell," he gasps. "Standing here you can feel the Force screaming. Everything that makes us human, compassion and connection and purpose, it's all stripped away. All that's left is hunger and pain." The mass shadow generator was Revan's weapon, designed by Bao-Dur, one of his most trusted officers deployed by the Jedi Exile, who would later face the Sith triumvirate. It was supposed to end the war decisively by destroying the Mandalorian fleet gathered at Malachor V, and it succeeded. The Mandalorians were annihilated, but so were thousands of Republic soldiers, and every Force sensitive in the system, Jedi and Sith alike, died screaming as the weapon tore through their connection to the Force itself. The Traeus Academy was built afterward by those who survived, not physically survived, spiritually survived. Jedi whose connection to the Force was so damaged by the mass shadow generator that they could no longer function as Jedi. They retreated here to this wound because it was the only place where their broken connection felt normal. Inside the Academy, you find records of what happened next. Revan and Alec, victorious but changed, didn't return to the Republic immediately. Instead, they pursued the enemy Master Revan had sensed manipulating the Mandalorians. The trail led into the unknown regions, to Drummond Caius, to the Sith Emperor Vitiate. Master Valis finds a functioning terminal, remarkably preserved by dark side energy. This is Revan's own account, he says, accessing files recorded after his redemption, but describing the confrontation. The text is clinical, almost detached, as if Revan is describing something that happened to someone else. They found the Emperor. They confronted him, believing two powerful Jedi Knights could defeat or at least escape from one Sith Lord. No matter how ancient, they were catastrophically wrong. Vitiate's power was beyond anything in their experience. He dominated their minds as easily as a human might swat an insect, and rather than simply killing them, he reprogrammed them, stripped away their Jedi identity, and replaced it with Sith purpose. They became his agents, sent back to Republic space with a mission. Find the Starforge, the ancient Rakatan superweapon. Use it to build an infinite fleet, conquer the Republic, weaken it so thoroughly that when the Emperor finally emerged from hiding, nothing could resist him. But something unexpected happened. The Starforge itself was a dark side nexus, drawing on the negative emotions of those who used it. Its power was immense, but corrosive, and as Revan and Alec used it, as they became Darth Revan and Darth Malak, the Starforge's corruption broke the Emperor's programming. They regained free will, but by then they were already Sith Lords. already commanding a fleet, already at war with the Republic. This is where it gets complicated, Master Valis says, pulling up more files. Because Revan, even corrupted, even calling himself a Sith Lord, wasn't trying to destroy the Republic. He was trying to save it. The records show Revan's strategy during the Jedi Civil War. Precision strikes against military targets, minimal civilian casualties. Conquered worlds had their infrastructure preserved, not destroyed. Industrial capacity was maintained. Skilled workers were protected. He was conquering, yes, but conquering efficiently, maintaining everything that made the Republic strong. His logic was twisted but sincere. He knew the Sith Emperor was coming, knew that a fractured Republic would fall easily, so he would conquer it first. Unite it under his rule, preserve its strength. And when the Emperor revived, Revan would turn that strength against him. He was still trying to save the galaxy. He just concluded that tyranny was the most efficient path to salvation. Malak's fall was simpler and more tragic. He followed Revan absolutely. When Revan said they needed to defy the Council, Malak agreed. When Revan pursued the Mandalorians into the unknown regions, Malak followed. When Revan became a Sith Lord, Malak did the same. But the Star Forge corrupted him more deeply. Where Revan maintained strategic clarity, Malak descended into hunger for power itself. You find holographic recordings from the Jedi Civil War. Revan in his distinctive mask, commanding fleets with precision and purpose. And beside him, Malak, already changing, his jaw destroyed in battle, replaced with a metallic prosthetic, his eyes growing harder, his disagreements with Revan becoming more frequent. The betrayal was inevitable. Malak ordered Revan's flagship destroyed during a Jedi strike team's assault. The Jedi captured Revan's nearly dead body, but Malak assumed he'd killed him, and with Revan gone, Malak became Dark Lord. The change in strategy was immediate and catastrophic. Where Revan conquered to preserve, Malak conquered to dominate. Where Revan avoided civilian casualties, Malak used terror as a weapon. Where Revan sought efficiency, Malak sought submission. The war that had been brutal but strategic became simple genocide. Entire planets were given an ultimatum: surrender absolutely or be destroyed. Many were destroyed anyway just to make examples. Master Valis discovers the most damning evidence in a sealed archive. Malak was using captured Jedi as batteries, he says, voice hollow with horror. The Star Forge had chambers designed to drain Force users of their life energy. He would capture Jedi, imprison them in these chambers, and feed on their essence to enhance his own power. The recordings show it. Dozens of Jedi in suspended animation, their life force slowly drained to fuel Malak's abilities. Some of them were his former friends, people who had followed him and Revan into the Mandalorian wars, comrades who trusted him, all reduced to fuel for his growing addiction to power. Meanwhile, the Jedi Council made a desperate decision. They took Revan's broken body and broken mind and rebuilt him, wiped his memories, gave him a new identity, and used him as a weapon against Malak. It worked. Revan, not knowing who he really was, gradually rediscovered his own past, and when he finally learned the truth, when he understood that he had been Darth Revan, he made a choice that defined him forever. He chose the light, not because his memories were erased, not because he didn't understand what he'd done, but because, understanding both sides, having walked in complete darkness and remembered complete light, he could choose with full knowledge, and he chose redemption. The final confrontation between Revan and Malak took place at the Star Forge. You access recordings from Republic ships that observed the battle from a distance, the station tearing itself apart, the two former friends dueling while fleets clashed around them, and Revan drawing on both Jedi teaching and Sith techniques, ultimately proving stronger. Malak's final words are preserved in those recordings. Not threats or curses, just regret. You were always the master. he told Revan. "I followed you into darkness. Why couldn't you lead me back to light?" Revan had no answer, because the truth was unbearable. He could have, at any point during their shared fall, Revan could have recognized what was happening and pulled them both back. But he was too convinced of his own righteousness, too certain that his path was the only way to save the galaxy. And by the time he understood his error, his best friend had become a monster. "Master Valis powers down the terminals. We need to leave. This place is affecting both of us." He's right. You can feel it. The wound in the Force pulling at your thoughts, suggesting that connection and compassion are weaknesses, that power alone matters, that the ends justify any means. Standing here, you understand viscerally how Revan and Malak fell, not because they were weak, but because they were exposed to something that corroded the very foundations of their identity. As your ship struggles to escape Malachor V's gravitational chaos, you think about what makes Revan different from other Sith Lords. He fell trying to save the galaxy. He redeemed himself through conscious choice. And even after redemption, even after defeating Malak and destroying the Starforge, he returned to face the Sith Emperor, was captured, tortured for 300 years, and still never fully broke. Revan proved something important. Master Valis says during the journey away from the system, that redemption is possible, that falling to darkness doesn't have to be permanent. Every other Sith Lord we've studied either died dark or remained dark even after death. Revan chose differently. That gives me hope. But there's another side to that story. Malak didn't get redemption. Thousands of Jedi who followed them into darkness didn't get redemption. The Jedi exile, who activated the mass shadow generator under Revan's orders, spent years broken and alone. The consequences of Revan's choices rippled across the galaxy for decades. The next destination represents the darkest interpretation of Revan's legacy, the planet Malachor V again, but this time to study those who survived the mass shadow generator's devastation, the Sith Triumvirate. 3 lords who embodied different aspects of corruption so completely that they barely counted as human anymore. And the first of them, the most philosophically dangerous, was Revan's own teacher, Chrysia, the woman who became Darth Traya and taught an entire generation that the Force itself was the enemy. You're back at Malachor V, but this time approaching the Trayus Academy directly. The journey from studying Revan to studying his teacher requires only hours, but the conceptual distance is vast. Revan fell trying to save the galaxy through control. Traya fell trying to destroy the very thing that made control possible, the Force itself. Master Valis is exhausted. 2 visits to this wound in the Force within days is taking its toll. But he insists on continuing. Traya is perhaps the most dangerous Sith Lord we'll study, he explains. Not because of raw power, but because her arguments are sophisticated enough that they can corrupt through pure philosophy. No Force lightning required. Just words and logic. The Academy looms larger on second approach. You missed details during the first visit, focused as you were on understanding Revan. Now you see the structure's true purpose. Every corridor is designed to suppress Force connection slightly. Every chamber includes meditation spaces where students would practice functioning without relying on the Force. This was a school for learning to hate what you are. Chrysia's history begins not in darkness, but in light. She was a Jedi Master renowned for wisdom and insight. Her specialty was Jedi philosophy, the deep questions about the Force's nature and purpose. She trained multiple students, and by all accounts was exceptional at it. Her most famous student was Revan, and watching him fall, watching her greatest achievement become her greatest failure, broke something fundamental in her understanding of the Force. Inside the Academy, you find her personal chambers. Unlike the meditation spaces filled with dark side artifacts that other Sith Lords created, Traya's room is almost austere. Books, datapads, holocrons from both Jedi and Sith sources. This was a scholar's space, not a warrior's or a sorcerer's, someone who fell to darkness through thought rather than emotion. Master Valis finds her journals remarkably preserved. She documented everything, he observes. Her philosophy, her conclusions, even her descent into darkness is catalogued with academic precision. The journals chronicle her transformation. After Revan's fall, she began questioning Jedi teachings more aggressively. If the Force guided all things, why did it allow her student to fall? If light and dark needed balance, why did balance require so much suffering? If the Force had a will, was that will actually benevolent? These questions led her to study Sith philosophy, not to refute it, but to understand it. And in that study, she found something that disturbed her deeply. The Sith weren't wrong about everything. Their observation that the Force manipulated individuals toward predetermined outcomes had merit. Their frustration with Jedi passivity in the face of evil contained truth. Their pursuit of freedom from cosmic control resonated with legitimate philosophical concerns. She reached a conclusion that no Jedi or Sith had articulated before. Master Valis explains, reading from the journals, that both orders were slaves, the Jedi slaves to the light side's demands for sacrifice and selflessness, the Sith slaves to the dark side's hunger and corruption, and the Force itself was the slave master, using both sides to perpetuate conflict that fed it. This realization transformed her into Darth Treya, which translates to betrayer in Old Sith. She betrayed the Jedi by leaving the Order. She betrayed the Sith by seeking to destroy what they worshipped. She betrayed the Force itself by attempting to kill it. The Academy's central chamber shows where she taught this philosophy to others, not through coercion, but through argument. Students came voluntarily, drawn by her reputation and curiosity about her radical ideas. She taught them to question everything, to see the Force not as mystical energy field, but as cosmic parasite, to understand that every prophecy was a chain, every Force bond was manipulation, every moment of Force guidance was loss of genuine free will. You activate a holocron found in the teaching chamber. Treya appears, and her image is striking, elderly but not frail. Eyes that have seen too much and concluded too little make sense. When she speaks, her voice carries the patient tone of a teacher explaining difficult concepts to promising students. The Force is not your ally, she begins. It is not benevolent, it is not even conscious in the way you understand consciousness. It is a mechanism, self-perpetuating, that uses sentient beings as tools to maintain its own existence. Every conflict between light and dark feeds it. Every death in the Force's name sustains it. You are not protected by the Force, you are consumed by it. The hologram shifts to show her teaching methods, not lightsaber combat or Force techniques, but Socratic dialogue, asking questions that force students to examine their assumptions, presenting scenarios that challenge their beliefs about right and wrong, gradually undermining their certainty until they're ready to hear her ultimate argument. True freedom, Treya's hologram continues, requires severing the Force's hold, not just avoiding its dark side, not just serving its light side, but rejecting it entirely, becoming independent beings capable of genuine choice rather than puppets dancing on strings we cannot see. Master Valis pauses the recording. This is where she's simultaneously brilliant and catastrophically wrong. Her observations about the Force's influence have merit, but her conclusion that consciousness and free will require severing from the Force is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Force is. The journals describe how she formed the Sith triumvirate with two other survivors of Malachor, 5, Darth Nihilus, who embodied the wound in the Force as hunger, Darth Sion, who embodied suffering and refusal to die. Together they represented three responses to trauma. Nihilus consumed to fill emptiness, Sion endured through hatred, and Treya sought to understand, and ultimately destroy the thing that caused the trauma. But her students betrayed her. Nihilus and Cyan, having learned enough to no longer need a teacher, turned on Traya. They stripped her of her direct connection to the Force, leaving her able to sense it but unable to wield it as she once had. For most Force users, this would be crippling. For Traya, it was almost validation. She'd argued that the Force was a crutch. Now she would prove you could function without it. The Academy's deeper levels show how she survived. She developed techniques for manipulating the Force through others, using Force bonds as bridges. She refined her understanding of lightsaber combat to compensate for diminished Force enhancement. And most importantly, she found a new student, the Jedi exile, Mitra Surik, a woman who had survived the mass shadow generator and somehow cut herself off from the Force rather than be destroyed by the wound. Traya saw the exile as proof of her philosophy. Master Valis explains. Here was someone who had survived without the Force, who had made choices based purely on human judgment rather than Force guidance. The perfect student for her ultimate lesson. The final chamber contains recordings of Traya's last teachings to the exile. Unlike earlier philosophical lectures, these are personal, almost gentle, a teacher who genuinely cares about her students' growth, even if the lessons being taught are poisonous. You have felt the Force die, Traya tells the exile in one recording. You know what it is to be truly alone, truly free. The galaxy would call that tragedy. I call it liberation. You can choose now, not because the Force guides you, not because destiny demands it, but because you, purely you, decide this is what should be done. But there's sadness in her voice, because for all her philosophy about freedom and independence, Traya herself couldn't let go. She remained obsessed with the Force even while arguing for liberation from it. She stayed at Malachor 5, at the wound, unable to move beyond what had broken her. And when the exile finally confronted her, when student faced teacher in final combat, the exile had reconnected to the Force, had chosen to reconnect, despite knowing she could exist without it, and in that choice, made with full knowledge of both options, lay more freedom than Traya's philosophy of rejection ever offered. Master Valis finds the final recording, made by the exile herself after Traya's death. She asked me if I understood her lessons. The exile's voice says, I told her I did, that she taught me to question everything, including her teachings. She smiled at that. Said I was her greatest student because I'd learned what she taught but reached different conclusions. Then she let go, just chose to die. After everything, after all her arguments about the Force controlling death, she proved that will matters most. She chose her moment. That's the only freedom that ever mattered. Outside the Academy, you stand at the edge of a precipice overlooking the shattered planet below. Master Valis joins you, looking exhausted but thoughtful. What do you think of her philosophy? He asks. Honestly. You consider carefully. She asked important questions. The Force does influence us in ways we don't fully understand. Prophecies do shape behavior. Destiny can become self-fulfilling. But she concluded that because we're influenced, we have no agency. That's where she was wrong. Influence isn't control, guidance isn't manipulation, and the Force doesn't have to be an enemy just because it's not fully comprehensible. Master Valis nods. She fell not through seeking power, but through seeking answers, and when the answers she found were uncomfortable, she declared war on reality itself rather than accept complexity. That's perhaps the most intellectual fall to darkness we'll study. No passion, no hatred, just philosophy pursued past the point of wisdom. As your ship leaves Malachor 5 for the final time, you reflect on the progression. Each Sith Lord represents a different path to darkness, different motivations, different methods, different justifications, but they all end the same way, trapped by the very freedom they sought. enslaved by the power they pursued, destroyed by the philosophies they lived by. The journey continues. 2 more members of the triumvirate remain to be studied: Darth Nihilus, the wound that walks, and Darth Sishan, the dead man who refused to die. Together with Trier, they represent the ultimate evolution of Sith corruption. Not power-seeking, but power become. Not darkness chosen, but darkness embodied. The next chapters will be the most disturbing yet. Qatar, a dead world orbiting a living star. From orbit it looks almost normal. Continents and oceans in proper arrangement. Cloud patterns suggesting active weather systems, but your sensors tell a different story. No electromagnetic emissions, no heat signatures except solar radiation, no radio signals, no life signs of any kind, not even bacteria. This is what Darth Nihilus left behind, one of dozens of worlds he consumed during his brief catastrophic existence as a Sith Lord. But Qatar is special. This is where he fed on an entire conclave of Jedi Masters, attempting to rebuild the Order after the Jedi Civil War. This is where he proved that hunger given form and will becomes something far worse than any traditional Sith Lord. Master Valis refuses to land. "We can study this from orbit," he says. His voice carries strain from days of exposure to dark side sights. There's nothing down there, nothing at all. That's the horror of Nihilus. He didn't conquer or corrupt, he erased. The historical records paint a picture of something that shouldn't exist. Nihilus wasn't born a Sith Lord. He was born human, though no records preserve his actual name. He was at Malachor 5 when the mass shadow generator activated. Like thousands of others, he should have died when the weapon tore through the Force itself. Unlike the others, something in him twisted in that moment of annihilation. The wound in the Force didn't kill him. It transformed him into a wound that walks. What emerged from Malachor 5 was no longer human in any meaningful sense. His body had become a shell held together purely by dark side will. His consciousness had transformed into singular, all-consuming hunger for Force energy. He wasn't a person who felt hunger. He was hunger given awareness and agency. You access footage recovered from the few survivors of his attacks. The recordings are fragmentary, corrupted by the same Force drain that killed those who made them. But enough remains to understand what happened. A ship would appear in orbit, not a massive dreadnought, just the Ravager, Nihilus's dying flagship, held together by the same dark side will that sustained his body. He would stand on the bridge, raise one hand, and an entire planet would scream. The drain didn't just kill, it consumed the victim's very connection to the Force. People died, feeling themselves being erased from existence. And Force sensitives, those with stronger connections, died slower, more aware, understanding with horrifying clarity, as their essence was ripped away and devoured by something that could never be satisfied. Master Valis pulls up the timeline of Nihilus's destruction. He consumed at least 7 worlds we know about, probably more in the unknown regions. Each feeding made him stronger, but also made the hunger worse. He was trapped in a cycle where satisfying hunger only increased it. Qatar was his most devastating attack, because it was targeted. The surviving Jedi, desperate to rebuild their order, called a secret conclave. Every master who could reach Qatar attended. They thought gathering their strength would protect them. Instead, they created the richest feeding ground Nihilus had encountered. He consumed them all in minutes. Hundreds of Jedi, thousands of colonists. Every living thing on the planet, all drawn into the void he had become. The few scattered reports from survivors on other worlds describe what they felt through the Force at the moment of Qatar's death. A scream, not audible, not metaphorical, but a genuine scream in the Force, as billions of connections were severed simultaneously. Force sensitives across the galaxy felt it. Many were traumatized so severely they could never use the Force again. Some went permanently insane. The Jedi Order, already broken by the Jedi Civil War, was reduced to perhaps a dozen members scattered across the galaxy. He accomplished what no other Sith Lord ever managed, Master Valis observes quietly. He nearly exterminated the Jedi entirely, not through military might or political maneuvering, through pure predation, and the terrifying thing is, he didn't do it for conquest, he did it to feed. You examine the wreckage of the Ravager, Nihilus's flagship that still orbits nearby. The ship is dead now, decades after his defeat. But like Qatar, it radiates absence. The crew were long dead, sustained as walking corpses by Nihilus's will. They served him not out of loyalty, but because they literally couldn't die while he needed them. When the Jedi exile finally destroyed him, the ship immediately began falling apart. His will had been the only thing holding it together. The historical records describe his appearance. Robes that seemed to float rather than drape. A mask that showed no face beneath, only darkness. A voice that was barely voice at all, more like pressure inside the skull of anyone who heard it. He could speak, but his language was corrupted, distorted, as if the act of forming words was barely remembered muscle memory from whatever human he used to be. His relationship with the other triumvirate members was purely functional. Trier had taught him to channel his hunger more effectively. Sion couldn't be consumed because he was already dead, but Nihilus felt no loyalty, no connection, no emotion beyond the constant gnawing need to feed. When he and Sion betrayed Trier, it wasn't from ambition or malice. Nihilus simply recognized she was trying to control him, and he refused to be controlled by anything except hunger itself. Master Valis finds a recording made by a Jedi who survived one of Nihilus's attacks by cutting herself off from the Force entirely. Her account is clinical, describing the event with the detachment of extreme trauma. He didn't see us as people, didn't see us as enemies. We were food, that's all. I watched my companions die, and his expression never changed. No satisfaction, no pleasure. Just the same empty hunger after consuming dozens as before. The Jedi exile's confrontation with Nihilus was unique in Sith history. She was a wound in the Force like him. When he tried to drain her, he found nothing to consume, like trying to eat a void. The feedback disoriented him long enough for her companions to destroy his physical form, and without a body to anchor his consciousness, without the constant feeding to sustain himself, he simply dispersed. Hunger without form, purpose without vessel, gone, but never truly defeated, because the void he represented can never be filled. You think about what Nihilus proves about the dark side's ultimate promise: power, control, dominance over death itself. He achieved all of it. He became so powerful he could drain entire planets. He controlled life and death, absolutely within his range. He transcended normal existence, becoming something that couldn't be killed by conventional means, and it was hell, not metaphorically. Literally, an existence of perpetual unsatisfied hunger, unable to stop consuming, even though consumption brought no relief. This is what scares me most about the Sith we've studied, Master Valis says as you prepare to leave the system. The progression. Ajunta Paul extended his life, and paid with paranoia. Vitier consumed a planet, and paid with his humanity. Nihilus became consumption itself, and paid with everything. Each generation pushes further, refines the techniques, and the cost grows exponentially. Qatar recedes behind you. A tomb world that will remain dead for millennia, possibly forever. The Force may never fully return here, because Nihilus didn't just drain it. He consumed it so completely that the very possibility of the Force existing was damaged. Standing on Qatar would feel like standing in a hole in reality where something fundamental is simply missing. The data you've collected will help future Jedi understand what happened. will warn them about the dangers of pursuing power so absolutely that you become the thing you sought to control. But looking at that dead world, you wonder if understanding is enough. If warnings matter, when each generation of dark side users believes they'll be different, that they'll be the exception, that they can handle what destroyed everyone before them. Nihilus proved they're wrong. He achieved ultimate power, and it achieved nothing except his own eternal suffering. He embodied the dark side's final promise, and the promise was a lie. Power doesn't satisfy. It hungers, and if you feed that hunger long enough, eventually there's nothing left of you except the hunger itself. The next destination represents a different kind of horror. Not hunger, but endurance. Not consumption, but refusal. Darth Sion, the man who wouldn't die, who held his shattered body together through pure hatred for centuries, who proved that sometimes the worst prison is the one you build yourself, and sometimes death is mercy you have to give yourself permission to accept. Master Valus looks exhausted. One more member of the Triumvirate, he says, then we can leave this era behind. Move forward to Darth Bane and the reformation of the Sith. But first we need to understand the Lord of Pain, the immortal who suffered every moment of his immortality and couldn't find the strength to let go. Your ship turns toward the final Triumvirate site, toward understanding the third and perhaps most tragic member, the Sith Lord who won the battle against death and lost everything that made victory worthwhile. Korriban, again. But this time you're not visiting ancient tombs from the Golden Age. You're investigating the Sith Academy that Darth Sion briefly controlled after the Jedi Civil War. The building is newer than the monuments in the Valley of the Dark Lords. Cruder, built by people who understood Sith architecture's purpose but lacked the resources or time to perfect it. Master Valus moves slowly. The accumulated exposure to dark side sites has taken a visible toll. His movements are careful, measured, like someone nursing an injury. But he insisted on completing this investigation. We're almost done, he says. Just Sion, then Bane, then we can return to Coruscant and compile everything we've learned. Inside the Academy, the atmosphere is different from Treya's philosophical library or Nihilus's void. This place feels like violence barely contained. Training rooms where students fought to exhaustion. Meditation chambers designed to amplify pain rather than transcend it. Every surface seems to radiate barely suppressed rage. Darth Sion's story begins in the same era as Exar Kun. He was a Sith warrior during the Great Sith War, fighting for Kun's brotherhood against the Republic. The historical records suggest he was competent but not exceptional, skilled enough to survive multiple battles, strong enough in the Force to be noticed, but not the kind of prodigy who shapes galactic events. Then came the final battle. Jedi strike teams descended on Kun's forces, so Physian found himself facing multiple Jedi Knights simultaneously. They broke his body, shattered bones, ruptured organs, wounds that should have killed him instantly. But something in him refused, not courage, not determination, just absolute refusal to accept death. The dark side responded to that refusal. It flooded into him, not healing the wounds but holding the broken pieces together. His bones refused wrong. His flesh remained damaged. Every movement brought agony, but he lived or existed. The distinction became unclear. You find records of the years that followed. Sion wandered battlefields, fighting anyone he encountered, Jedi, Sith, criminals. It didn't matter. Combat was the only thing that made sense. Pain was his constant companion, so he made pain his weapon. Every time someone broke his body further, he simply refused to die again. And the dark side, feeding on his suffering, kept him animated. Master Valus discovers a medical analysis someone attempted millennia ago. His body should have been dead within hours, he reads. multiple organ failures, bone fragments piercing vital structures, blood loss that should have caused immediate unconsciousness. But dark side energy is literally holding his cellular structure together. He's not alive in any biological sense. He's will made manifest. Eventually, Cyan encountered Darth Treya. She saw potential in him, not as a warrior. He was too damaged for effective combat, but as proof of concept. Here was someone who had transcended death through sheer refusal to die. She taught him to channel the pain more effectively, to use suffering as fuel rather than just enduring it. Under her instruction, Cyan transformed from a broken warrior into something far more dangerous, the Lord of Pain. The Academy's training chambers show how he passed those lessons forward. Students were subjected to increasing levels of pain while maintaining force connection. Those who broke were discarded. Those who endured learned to convert agony into power. It was brutal, efficient, and created Sith assassins who could function through injuries that would incapacitate normal beings. But Cyan never escaped his own pain. The recordings recovered from students describe him in detail, moving like a corpse animated by puppet strings, each step accompanied by the sound of bones grinding, breathing labored and wheezing, skin cracked and weeping. He was a walking lesson in the cost of refusing to let go. His relationship with the other Triumvirate members was complex. He and Nihilus betrayed Treya together, but there was no alliance afterward. Nihilus couldn't consume Cyan because he was already dead. Cyan couldn't intimidate Nihilus because hunger knows no fear. They tolerated each other's existence and nothing more. Treya's betrayal affected Cyan differently than it affected Nihilus. For Nihilus, it was just removal of an obstacle. For Cyan, it was personal. She had shown him how to survive, had given purpose to his suffering, and then she tried to control him. The betrayal wasn't about ambition, it was about refusing to be anyone's tool ever again. You activate a holocron found in Cyan's personal chambers. His image appears, and it's immediately disturbing. You can see the cracks in his skin, the wrong angles of his bones, the way his jaw hangs slightly disconnected. When he speaks, his voice is a rasp forced through a throat that shouldn't function. Pain is the purest teacher, he says. It strips away illusions, destroys comfort, forces you to confront reality without mercy. Every moment of my existence is agony, and every moment teaches me that will is stronger than flesh. That purpose transcends suffering, that death is a choice, not an inevitability. The holocron shows his philosophy. Pain leads to strength, comfort leads to weakness. Immortality achieved through endurance is superior to immortality achieved through power. He believed himself proof that the dark side rewards those who refuse to submit to anything, even biological necessity. But the recordings from his students tell a different story. They describe his growing instability. The moments where he would freeze mid-motion, as if his will momentarily faltered and his body started to collapse. The times he would rage at nothing, lashing out at empty air. The slow realization among his followers that their master wasn't demonstrating strength. He was trapped. Master Valis finds the account of Sion's encounters with the Jedi exile. He hunted her across the galaxy, not because she posed a strategic threat, not because Treya ordered it, but because she represented something he couldn't understand. She had suffered like him, lost everything, been broken by the Force, but she found peace, and he couldn't tolerate that peace existed while he suffered. Their confrontations grew increasingly personal. Sishan would demand to know why she didn't hate, why she wasn't consumed by bitterness, why she still chose compassion despite everything that had been done to her. Her answers confused him, frustrated him, made him question the only philosophy that gave his suffering meaning. The final battle took place at the Treyas Academy, on Malachor 5. Cyan fought the exile with everything he had. She wounded him repeatedly. He kept standing up, his body held together by nothing except refusal to accept defeat. And then she did something no one had done in the 2,000 years since his transformation. She showed him compassion. The recording preserves her words. You've suffered enough. You've endured for centuries. You've proven your strength 1,000 times over. You can stop now. You're allowed to let go. For the first time in millennia, someone gave Sion permission to die, not as a threat, not as an insult, but as genuine mercy. And something in him broke, not his body, that was already broken, but the will that held the broken pieces together. For the first time, he questioned why he was still fighting, what he was proving, who he was trying to convince. Master Valis reads the final account. He asked her if he could have been different. If there was another path, she told him, yes. That even now, even after everything, he could choose differently. And he made his choice. He let go. His body collapsed to dust. Immediately. There was nothing holding it together except his will, and once he released that will, 2,000 years of decay happened in seconds. You stand in the chamber where he trained his assassins. The dark side presence here is fading. Sign sustained it through his existence, and without him, it's slowly dissipating. In another century, this place will be just empty rooms. The academy will be ruins, and the Lord of Pain will be remembered only in texts and recordings. What makes him different from Nihilus? You ask Master Valis. He considers carefully. Nihilus couldn't choose to stop. The hunger controlled him. Saurian could have chosen to die at any moment. He sustained his own prison for 2,000 years. That makes it more tragic, not less. He had the key to his cell the entire time. He just couldn't see it until someone else pointed it out. The progression is clear. Now, Traya fell through philosophy and was freed by philosophy. Nihilus fell through transformation and was destroyed because transformation was complete. Sion fell through refusal and was freed when someone gave him permission to stop refusing. 3 different paths into darkness. 3 different forms of imprisonment. 3 different forms of release. As you leave Korriban for the final time, you reflect on what the triumvirate represents together. They are the ultimate endpoint of Sith philosophy. Traya shows that studying darkness consumes the student. Nisus shows that pursuing power transforms you into the power itself. Sion shows that refusing to accept limits creates suffering without purpose. Together they prove that every path the dark side offers leads to a different form of prison. The final Sith Lord awaits, Darth Bane. The one who learned from every failure you've studied, who examined 2,000 years of Sith history and concluded that everything had been done wrong, who reformed the Sith into something that could actually endure, and who succeeded where every previous Dark Lord failed, not by being stronger, but by being smarter. Ruusan, a world transformed by catastrophe into something both beautiful and haunting. Grasslands roll beneath your ship as you descend, but sensors detect gravitational anomalies everywhere. Pockets where the force is concentrated so densely that reality bends. These are the scars of the thought bomb. The superweapon that ended both the Brotherhood of Darkness and the last great Sith War. The weapon that one man used to kill his own side and remake the Sith forever. 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Old Republic Sith era is ending. What comes next will be different, smaller, hidden, patient, and ultimately more successful than anything that came before. Master Valis has recovered somewhat during the journey. Ruusan's presence in the Force is powerful, but not corrupted like Malachor 5 or Drummond Kai. This is where it all changed, he says, as you land near the Valley of the Jedi. Every Sith Lord we've studied failed to create something lasting. Bane succeeded, not by being more powerful, but by being more ruthless in ways they never imagined. The Valley of the Jedi is sacred ground. Thousands of Force users, both Jedi and Sith, died here simultaneously when the thought bomb detonated. Their essences remain, creating a nexus of incredible power. You can feel them, not as individuals but as a collective presence, peaceful now. But the recordings describe the moment of death, screaming, terror, the realization that both sides had been manipulated. Darth Bane's story begins on Apatros, a mining world where he was born into poverty and abuse. His real name was Desil. He discovered Force powers through rage when he killed his father, fled to join the Sith forces fighting the Army of Light, rose through ranks not through political skill but through pure competence in combat, eventually earned admission to the Sith Academy on Korriban. And there he began to learn, not just Sith techniques, but Sith history. Every holocron he could access, every text in the archives, every record of every Dark Lord going back to Ajunta Pal, he studied them all, and he recognized a pattern. The Sith always destroyed themselves, not through external defeat, but through internal betrayal. The system encouraged competition that became destructive, power struggles that weakened the order, ambitious apprentices who killed capable masters before learning everything, a culture that celebrated strength but guaranteed instability. Master Valis locates the site where Bane's revelation crystallized, a cave system near the valley, where he studied alone for months. Inside you find evidence of his research, copies of texts about every major Sith Lord, analyses of what succeeded and what failed, calculations about power concentration versus power distribution, and his conclusion, carved into stone. The Sith are diluted. Hundreds of lords means hundreds of competing agendas. Real power requires focus. 2. Master and apprentice. One to embody power, one to crave it. The apprentice will eventually surpass and kill the master. This is not weakness. This is evolution. Each generation stronger than the last, patient, hidden, inevitable. The Rule of Two. The most significant reformation of Sith philosophy in their entire history. Not more power, not better techniques, just mathematics and patience. But implementing this rule required something unprecedented. The Brotherhood of Darkness, the Sith Order of Bane's era, numbered in the hundreds. All of them would need to die, and Bane couldn't kill them directly. He was powerful, but not that powerful. So he did something more clever and more monstrous. He taught them how to build a thought bomb, told them it was the ultimate weapon against the Jedi, would destroy all Force users in a massive radius, perfect for ending the war decisively. What he didn't tell them was that it wouldn't discriminate between Jedi and Sith, wouldn't allow users to shield themselves, would kill everyone, including the ones who activated it. The Brotherhood built it, deployed it, and died alongside their Jedi enemies, thousands of Force users annihilated in an instant. The war ended not with victory for either side, but with mutual destruction, except Bane wasn't there. He'd withdrawn before the battle, claiming to prepare a backup plan. In reality, he was ensuring he'd be the only Sith Lord to survive. Master Valis examines the epicenter. This is the most ruthless act we've encountered. Not Vitiate consuming planets. Not Nihilus feeding on the Force itself. This a Sith Lord who deliberately murdered his entire order, hundreds of his own allies, people who trusted him, because his mathematical analysis suggested the Rule of Two would be more effective than the Brotherhood's collective approach. The recordings show what happened next. Bane found a young Force sensitive named Xana, made her his apprentice, began teaching her everything he knew, but also preparing for the day she would inevitably try to kill him. The relationship wasn't partnership. It was mutual preparation for eventual conflict, and that conflict would determine if the student had truly surpassed the master. You discover Bane's personal holocron hidden in the cave system. His image appears. Physically, he's impressive, tall, muscular, covered in obelisk parasites that enhance his power but cause constant pain. When he speaks, his voice carries absolute certainty. I have studied 25,000 years of Sith history. Every lord believed they would be different. Every lord believed their power would endure. Every lord was wrong. The flaw is systemic. Sharing power guarantees betrayal. Multiple Sith lords guarantee civil war. The mathematics are clear. 2 is the maximum sustainable number. The rule of 2 will succeed where everything else failed. The holocron details his long-term strategy. The Sith would hide, operate in complete secrecy. Let the Jedi think they were extinct. Meanwhile, each generation would pass knowledge to the next, refined techniques. Lessons from history, patient manipulation of galactic events, building toward a moment, perhaps 1,000 years in the future, when the Sith would emerge strong enough to destroy the Jedi utterly. Master Valis pulls up historical data. He was right. The rule of 2 worked. The Sith lineage continued unbroken for 1,000 years. Darth Plagueis, Darth Sidious. Eventually they did destroy the Jedi Order, reformed the Republic into an empire. Palpatine ruled the galaxy. Bane's plan succeeded beyond his wildest expectations. But there's a cost visible even in success. You access records of later Sith lords in Bane's lineage, each one more twisted than the last. The isolation required for secrecy created paranoia. The rule of 2 meant no peers, no colleagues, no one to trust. Master and apprentice existed in perpetual opposition. The moment trust formed, one would betray the other. Bane created a sustainable system, you observe. But sustainability isn't the same as desirability. 1,000 years of Sith lords living in isolation, trusting no one, preparing constantly for betrayal from the one person they're supposed to teach. That's not power. That's another kind of prison. Master Valis nods. Every Sith reform just creates a new version of the same trap. Bane recognized that unlimited ambition destroys organizations, so he limited the organization to 2 people, which meant every Sith Lord afterward lived in isolation, paranoid, unable to build anything beyond preparing their own replacement. You find records of Bane's final decades. The obelisks that enhanced his power eventually began killing him. He needed to remove them, but doing so would weaken him significantly. And Zana was growing stronger, watching, waiting for the moment when he'd be vulnerable enough to defeat. The relationship that started as teacher and student had become predator and prey, with both occupying both roles simultaneously. Their final confrontation is preserved in multiple accounts. An epic duel lasting hours. Bane tried to use essence transfer, a technique he'd learned from studying Vitiate's methods, attempting to possess Xana's body and continue existing. The records are unclear about whether he succeeded. Some sources suggest he did. Others say Xana killed him and took his place as Dark Lord. The ambiguity is intentional, Master Valis explains. It doesn't matter which one won. The rule of 2 continued either way. That's the genius and horror of Bane's system. Individual Sith Lords became irrelevant. The lineage is what matters. The accumulated knowledge, the patient plan. Whether any specific person survives is secondary to ensuring the institution persists. Outside, you walk through the Valley of the Jedi. Thousands died here, because one man calculated that their deaths would make the survivors stronger. The grass grows thick and healthy, fed by Force energy. Birds nest in trees that shouldn't grow this large. Life flourishes on ground consecrated by death. It's beautiful and terrible in equal measure. This is the final lesson, Master Valis says. Bane succeeded where every previous Sith Lord failed. He created something that outlasted him, that achieved its ultimate goal. The Sith did destroy the Jedi, did conquer the Republic, did rule the galaxy. Everything Bane planned came true. You wait for the other conclusion. Master Valis delivers it quietly, and it still wasn't worth it. Palpatine ruled for just 20 years before being destroyed. The Empire lasted a single generation. The Jedi returned. The Republic reformed. Bane's 1,000-year plan resulted in 2 decades of dominance, followed by complete collapse. Even success was temporary. Even perfection failed. The data you've compiled is complete now. 13 Sith Lords across 25,000 years, each one more sophisticated than the last. Each one learning from previous failures. Each one convinced they'd found the answer. And each one proving that the dark side's promises are lies. Power corrupts. Immortality imprisons. Victory is temporary, and the cost is always more than the gain. As your ship leaves Ruusan heading back toward Coruscant, you feel the weight of what you've learned. These weren't monsters. They were people who made choices. Each choice seemed reasonable at the time. Each step into darkness felt like progress towards something worthwhile. And collectively they created 25,000 years of tragedy, demonstrating through repeated failure that some paths lead nowhere worth going. One section remains, the conclusion, where you synthesize everything learned and find whatever wisdom can be extracted from studying so much darkness. Master Valis settles into meditation for the journey home, and you begin organizing your thoughts for the final report. The document that will ensure future generations learn from history without having to repeat it. Coruscant at dawn, your ship breaks through the upper atmosphere as the planet's star rises beyond the curved horizon. City lights that never fully dim begin fading as natural light spreads across endless urban landscape. Billions of beings waking to another day, most of them unaware of the dark history you've just finished documenting, the cycles of power and corruption that shaped their civilization across millennia. Master Valis is awake beside you, silent, contemplative. The journey has aged him. Not physically, but in some deeper way. He's carried the weight of all that darkness, and emerged changed but not broken. After a long silence, he speaks. We've walked through 25,000 years of failure, 13 Sith Lords, each one convinced they'd found the path to ultimate power, and every single one proved the same truth. Power sought for itself becomes a prison. Knowledge pursued without wisdom leads to destruction, and refusing to accept limits transforms life into suffering. The Jedi Temple appears below, spires reaching toward the sky. Gardens where younglings train in peace, archives where knowledge is preserved and protected. This is what survived. Not through domination but through service, not through isolation but through community, not through accumulating power but through giving it away when appropriate. Landing procedures are routine, familiar. After visiting dead worlds and corrupted temples, the simple efficiency of a functioning spaceport feels almost miraculous. People doing their jobs, systems working as designed, order maintained not through fear but through cooperation. The contrast with everything you've studied couldn't be sharper. Master Valis leads you directly to the council chambers. Your report is expected. 6 months of investigation compressed into comprehensive documentation. Every Sith Lord studied, every pattern identified, every lesson extracted from their failures. The Council needs this information, not to use dark side techniques, but to understand how darkness operates, how it seduces, how it corrupts, how it promises everything and delivers only suffering. But before the formal debrief, Master Valis takes you to the temple gardens, the meditation spaces where Jedi go to reconnect with the Force in its purest form. You both need this, need to feel light side energy without the constant pressure of accumulated darkness. Need to remember why you studied all that horror, to protect, to understand, to prevent The garden is peaceful, water flowing over smooth stones, plants chosen for their calming properties. The force here feels like a gentle current rather than a raging storm. You settle into meditation naturally, and Master Valis joins you. For the first time in months, you simply breathe, simply exist, without agenda or purpose beyond being present. Images from your journey flow through your mind. Ajunta Pal's tomb on Korriban, his final message about losing himself. Tulak Horde's perfect combat mastery, rendered meaningless by poison. Marka Ragnar's century of peace that collapsed the moment he died. Naga Sado's desperate flight to Yavin 4. Vitiate's empty throne on Drummond Casey. Freydin Nad's refusal to release power, even in death. Exar Kun trapped in temples for 4 millennia. Rivan's complex journey from Jedi to Sith to redeemed hero. Malak consuming Jedi to fuel his own strength. Tracer's philosophical war against the Force itself. Nihilus' walking hunger that could never be satisfied. Sashin's 2,000 years of suffering through refusal to die. And Bane's ruthless reformation that succeeded and still ultimately failed. 13 Sith Lords, 13 different paths to darkness, 13 different forms of imprisonment, and not one of them achieved what they sought. Not permanently, not in any way that justified the cost. Master Valis's voice breaks the silence gently. What have you learned? You consider carefully before answering. That power is not the goal. It's a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on what you build with it. Every Sith Lord we studied treated power as the goal itself, accumulating more, protecting what they had, refusing to release it when appropriate, and that mindset transformed power from tool into master. He nods slowly. And what will you tell future Jedi who study your report? That understanding darkness doesn't require embracing it. That studying corruption doesn't necessitate being corrupted. And that the dark side's promises are all the same promise phrased differently. It offers control but delivers slavery. It offers strength but breeds paranoia. It offers immortality but creates prisons that last forever. The meditation deepens. Your consciousness expands beyond personal concerns. You feel the Force flowing through all things, through the garden plants, through the temple stones, through the billions of beings across Coruscant going about their lives. Connection without control. Awareness without domination. This is what the Sith Lords rejected in their quest for power. This simple truth, that being part of something larger is not weakness but strength. The sun climbs higher. Morning transitions into day. Your formal debrief will happen soon. But for now there's just this moment. This peace, this understanding, that some questions matter more than their answers. Some journeys are more important than their destinations, and some knowledge is only valuable when tempered with wisdom. Master Valis stands slowly. Come. The council waits, and after we deliver our report, I recommend you take leave. Visit somewhere bright, somewhere alive. Let the light back in after so long walking through shadow. The darkness we studied doesn't leave easily. You'll need time to process, to integrate what you've learned without letting it change you in ways you don't choose. You follow him, through the temple, familiar corridors, younglings training under patient instructors, knights discussing philosophy and tactics, masters meditating in quiet corners. This is what endured, not because Jedi were more powerful than Sith, but because they built something larger than themselves, because they understood that individual power matters less than collective purpose, because they were willing to let go. The report is delivered. The council listens with appropriate gravity. They ask questions, probe conclusions, request clarification on specific points, but mostly they acknowledge the work done and the wisdom earned. This knowledge will be preserved, protected, used to train future generations, not in how to use darkness, but in how to recognize its seductions and resist them. Afterward, standing on a temple balcony overlooking the city, you think about the Sith Lords one final time, remembering them not as monsters but as people who made choices, understanding that every being faces similar temptations, the desire for control when situations feel chaotic, the hunger for power when feeling vulnerable, the refusal to accept limits when limits feel unjust. These are universal impulses. What separates tragedy from wisdom is what you do with those impulses. The Sith Lords gave in, followed desire wherever it led, convinced themselves that their intentions justified their methods, and created suffering on galactic scales while believing they were pursuing righteousness or freedom or safety or knowledge. Their stories are warnings, not because they were evil from birth, but because they were human, and humanity includes the capacity for both transcendence and corruption. Night falls over Coruscant. The city lights begin their eternal glow. Somewhere in the temple, younglings are going to sleep, dreaming of becoming Jedi Knights. Somewhere in the galaxy, Force sensitives are making choices about who they want to become. And the lessons you've documented will be there to guide them, to show them what happens when power becomes purpose, when means overshadow ends, when individuals place themselves above everything else. The Force flows eternal, light and dark in perpetual cycle, Jedi and Sith rising and falling across millennia. But the fundamental truth remains constant. Connection is stronger than isolation. Service is more sustainable than domination. And wisdom lies not in accumulating power, but in knowing when to use it, when to set it aside, and when to let it go entirely. You return to your quarters. The journey is complete. The report is filed. The knowledge is preserved. And tonight, you'll sleep peacefully. Not because darkness has been defeated. Darkness will always exist, as long as beings have choices. But because you've walked through that darkness, understood its nature, and emerged still choosing light, that choice made with full knowledge of alternatives is the only victory that matters. May the Force be with you, always.